All
Okay.
participants to be able to see. All right, thanks.
And do we need to let anyone in?
Everyone should be already let in. And our
Lovely.
host,
All right
Ian.
then. It is 6 o'clock. We will call the September 9, 2024 TAB meeting to order. Before we get into the substance, we will go over the technical rules for this Zoom meeting, and I will hand it over to Veronica Sun for that.
All right, I'm gonna share screens. Is everyone able to see my slides? Perfect. We're pleased to have you join us to strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security. The following rules will be applied. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking is limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by the person presiding, and no person shall speak for longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using the person's real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they are commonly known by will not be permitted to speak. Please use the raise hand function to be recognized for public comment. If you're on the phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rules. The Q&A function is enabled. It will be used for individuals to communicate with the host. It should only be used for technical and online platform related questions only. If an attendee attempts to use Q&A for any other reasons, other reasons than seeking assistance from the host, the city reserves the right to disable the individual's access to the chat. Only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share the screens during the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the August 2024 minutes. I'm going to jump in here and say I believe that the minutes need some revision and a little bit of correction. Because I wasn't satisfied with the coverage of item 6, the public hearing and tab recommendation on the amendment to the Boulder Valley Regional Center Transportation Connections Plan. I didn't have a chance to look at the minutes until this morning, and I haven't gone back and listened to the item, but I'm not confident it captured the language of the motion quite accurately, and there was definitely some discussion and back and forth that I feel needs to be captured a little bit more thoroughly. Meredith, I'm happy to talk with you offline about it, but as it stands, I won't be able to approve the minutes. That doesn't mean that the rest of TAB can't. At the moment, you would not, well, you'd have a bare majority. But I would prefer that we table this item to next month so that the secretary has a chance to revise and sort of flesh out the minutes on that agenda item.
I think that sounds like a plan.
Okay. Did anyone else have any other comments or feedback related to the minutes from the August meeting?
I know that looking on YouTube, the beginning of the meeting was not recorded, I believe.
That's right. So yes, I remember when the recording happened and I thought, oops. So the minutes are, as far as I know, pretty good for that, but it is and did they get turned on after that agenda item?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so reasons, but I think they can be improved and we'll work on that.
Mhm.
Okay, so hearing no opposition, I'm just going to table that till next month. All right, then we will move right to public comment. I will note that we do have a public hearing item this evening on the Iris Avenue project, the CAN portion of Iris Avenue, or the Iris Avenue portion of CAN. And so to the extent that people and members of the public are wishing to address TAB on that matter, I'd ask you to hold your comments until we turn to that item. It's item 6 on the agenda. But otherwise, we will now open it to public comment for members of the public who wish to address tab on other issues.
And if anyone in the attendees wants to speak, please raise your hand. We may not have anyone with their hands raised, Sela.
Okay. Well, that's going to put us ahead of schedule. That's nice. Let's give it another few seconds. Seeing no hands, we will close the public comment. I'm sure that we will hear from more people when we reach the Iris Avenue, but in the meantime, we'll just move right along. Item 5 on the agenda is a presentation for feedback regarding the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan connections, and there's some changes on that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, I'll hand that over to Christopher Johnson and Kathleen King.
Thank you. And Christopher, I'll try not to call you Philip the whole time.
Sounds good.
I don't know why I did that last time. It was frequent. Do my best.
No problem.
Great. So I have a presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Sometimes it works better if I do it this way first and then do presenter mode. Try again. Go.
Looks
Okay.
good.
Looks good. Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for having us tonight. I know some of you, but not everyone. My name is Kathleen King. I'm a principal city planner on the comprehensive planning team in PNDS. And as mentioned, I'm joined tonight by comprehensive planning manager, Christopher Johnson. I have about a 10-minute presentation to share some updates that we're making to the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. And then Christopher and I are happy to take any clarifying questions you might have. And then we've got some time for a discussion. We're going to be asking you to speak around these key issues. So any feedback on proposed amendments that we're making to our East Boulder Sub-Community Plan, and would love to hear whether the board supports the amendments so that we can bring that feedback to Planning Board and City Council. So I think Tilo is maybe the only one on the board while we were working on the sub-community plan. So I'll give a quick overview of the plan. Sub-community plans are one of our tools that are intended to take the broad goals and policies of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and figure out how different parts of the city can contribute towards those goals. So we have 10 sub-communities in Boulder. East Boulder is located generally north of Arapahoe and east of Foothills, and it includes some areas around Boulder Community Health Campus, the Flatiron Business Park, and Valmont City Park. So that's sort of the area town where we are. The vision included in the plan is that East Boulder, which is mostly industrial and office space today, is going to evolve over time and will offer well-connected, some mixed-use neighborhoods. So two major components of the plan are a land use plan and a connections plan. And that connections plan starts with the existing network. Then we include the layer of the transportation master plan, and then we build upon that. This planning process took place over 3 years. We had a pretty robust community engagement effort, and then the plan was adopted in 2022. And since then, we've been working through implementation. One of the implementation projects is to update the zoning code and consider form-based code that will help realize the community's vision for how this area might look and feel in the future. So we've moved forward with the recommendation for form-based code and associated code updates to implement the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. And the form-based code includes these regulating plans. And those regulating plans take their direction from the connections plan that's included in the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. So there's all these kind of layers, and we're trying to get all of those layers to align so we can provide consistent direction. So in the process of developing the form-based code and those associated regulating plans, we identified 2 changes that we believe will better help realize the overall vision of the plan, and these require some minor amendments to the subcommunity plan. So here's that connections plan from the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan, and this network was really planned in step with the land uses and those conversations that we had with the community around changing land use. Because East Boulder today is mostly industrial, we have these really large blocks and there's not a lot of access through neighborhoods out there. So the connections plan recommends a few new connections to break areas into walkable blocks and provide more access through changing neighborhoods. As we began kind of translating this connections plan into the form-based code regulations, there were 2 areas where we identified some revision that would be necessary. So these are the Valmont Park West neighborhood and then the 55th and Arapahoe Station area. So we're going to look at Valmont Park West first. This neighborhood is located on the west side of Valmont City Park. So if you've been to like Vision Quest Brewery or the Spark Theater, that's the neighborhood that we're talking about. And you can see here, we had proposed 2 new street connections in this area. The 1A connection, which provides north-south access from Pearl Street to Sterling Drive, and then 1B, which creates a new east-west street that's about a block north of the Goose Creek Trail. So the proposed amendment to the subcommunity plan revises that 1A connection, and the revision is more aligned with the property and parcel lines. So we'll be more equitably distributing the right-of-way needs for that new connection. And then instead of proposing a new vehicular bridge over the creek, that 1N in green you can see on the map, this takes an advantage of an existing bridge that's out there and uses this as a pedestrian bicycle bridge to complete that north-south access over the creek. So then this is the second area. I've moved to 55th and Arapahoe, and it's called the 55th and Arapahoe Station area because we are planning for regional BRT station at this corner. And the planned land uses for the neighborhood around that are really planned for that transit-oriented development. We're really building the network and building the supporting land uses around that concept. So again, the focus of the new connections here is to create walkable blocks and deliver more access into and through this neighborhood to support that mix of uses. And the connection that we're going to be amending is 1E, which is this new north-south street just west of 55th. So this, unfortunately, this isn't labeled, but this is 55th here, and then this is Arapahoe. Okay. So as we further studied these connections and in planning for the implementation of the East Arapahoe Transportation Plan, we're striving to really try to consolidate access and reduce curb cuts along Arapahoe. This new proposed 1Q will connect that 1E connection to an already existing access point along Arapahoe, but we did still feel that having a pedestrian and bicycle connection in the location was valuable, so that 1M would provide that type of access and requires an amendment to the plan. So we are going to take these proposed amendments along with some land use plan amendments to Planning Board next month, and then City Council in November for consideration. The board and council will also be considering updates to the form-based code at this time, and we hope to do all of this at once to create consistency across all of our regulations for areas in East Boulder as properties and areas start to experience redevelopment in the future. So here are those next step dates. Couple of things coming up. The public review draft of the proposed code updates is going to be posted, yikes, in a few days. So we're finishing work up on that. And people can provide comments back on those if you get a chance to look through the code updates. And then here's our meeting dates as well. And that is it for me. KJ and I are both here to answer any questions, but we look forward to your feedback.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is a good time for members of TAB to ask any clarifying questions. Darcy, welcome aboard. Nice to see you. Does anyone have any questions for Kathleen or Christopher? Mike, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yeah, so when I first looked at this, I was under the impression this was all about adding new streets, which raised some concerns of ongoing maintenance into the future. But with your presentation, I understand now this is actually about modifying that plan to add streets so that they're more pedestrian and bicycle connections rather than necessarily car connections, which sounds like a good way of moving forward. Can you talk about, I know you mentioned there are large blocks in this area, talk about the need for adding new streets at all in this area?
Sure. Yeah, when we looked, the East Boulder area overall is pretty large, and there are some neighborhoods that are going to remain industrial, but there's these three kind of key neighborhoods where the community said, no, we'd like to see change in these areas. We want to introduce housing. We want to introduce new commercial spaces, and to kind of be able to serve those types of uses, we want walkable blocks. And so one of the ways that we are creating those walkable blocks is to introduce a more robust network in some of these changing neighborhoods. So the new streets both support that change of uses, but we're also really trying to be considerate and supportive of a lot of the existing businesses that are out there that have, use large trucks for deliveries and distribution of the types of materials that they create. So in both the sub-community plan and with these form-based code updates, we are trying to create some sort of front of house and back of house street types so that we can still serve those businesses, but also create these great pedestrian environments.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Darcy, go ahead.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks so much for your presentation. Can you talk about the facility upgrades planned for 55th Street? I just noticed it says facility upgrade, and I'm just curious about more details on that.
Sure. Yeah. Part of the sub-community plan also included a 55th and Arapahoe Station area plan. And we did a couple of conceptual studies for how 55th Street could evolve in the future. And the indication of facility upgrades is pointing to, I think, a future study for 55th Street where we would do something like a corridor study to reassess how that street is functioning with these new land uses. And I don't know, maybe Valerie, if you want to talk about where that is in the overall kind of work plan.
Yeah, and
Or
I'm
Jean.
actually going to see, and Valerie Watson, Interim Director, Transportation and Mobility. Jean is here as well. And so, Jean, I wonder if you might jump in and just talk a little bit about the status of that effort, how it connects to this.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Jean Sanson, Principal Transportation Planner. Thanks for that question, Darcy. So if you noticed, and it seems like you did on that map, there are two facilities that are identified for upgrades. One would be CO7, State Highway 7, or East Arapahoe, which we are currently in the preliminary design phase. We've developed concept plans and are working to fund phased improvements on the corridor. I think you're all pretty familiar with East Arapahoe by now. And then in regard to 55th Street, you know, it's interesting because 55th Street has a history, right? It was one of the original Living Lab corridors, and has since not necessarily made its way to the CAN, but we do recognize it is an important corridor, particularly as East Boulder continues to redevelop. But given that it's not a priority CAN corridor at this point, what we decided to do was we used the consultant resources that we had. This was a grant-funded project during the course of the study to look at potential future alternatives for redesigning 55th Street to be more comfortable for bicyclists and pedestrians, also acknowledging the large volume of freight and vehicular traffic that uses that corridor, but understanding that it would be premature to actually start a design process at this point. So the recommendations that are included in the East Boulder Subcommittee Plan are to, at a future date, embark on a more fully vetted corridor study, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Go ahead, Trini.
I just wanted to point out that I was very happy to see the reutilization of the bridge on Kathleen's presentation. That's all.
Thanks. Yeah, can you speak a little bit more about the rationale for that? Because right now it carries motor vehicles and people on foot and bike.
Yes, I can. So as we were thinking about how redevelopment might play out and what the most appropriate uses for those different streets, and looking back at the sub-community plan, we had planned a north-south connection kind of on the eastern end of that neighborhood that would also include a bridge. And as we talked through it with our transportation colleagues and with the code specialist that we were working with, duplicating the bridge seemed like not the right use of funds, but we still
Okay.
wanted to create that connection. And I think, you know, as the conversation evolved and recognizing the current sort of state of the bridge, it seemed like the best use of it was more in a pedestrian and cyclist oriented facility as opposed to making it a vehicular connection in the future. And I don't know, Christopher, if there was anything you wanted to add about that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it really, I think, spot on in terms of, you know, thinking about the larger goals of creating bicycle and ped connectivity in that area and relationship with the Goose Creek Greenway there, as opposed to, you know, what we ultimately kind of determined was the scale and complexity and cost of building a new multimodal vehicular bridge across Goose Creek would have been substantial. And so looking at the way to repurpose that existing structure, knowing that there is an existing more robust vehicular connection just a block to the west at 47th Street. So, you know, we really, I think, wanted to lean into the bike and ped connectivity between that Pearl district that's on the south side of the Greenway, and then Sterling Court and the West Valmont Park area there on the north side, as opposed to creating a through connection with vehicular traffic.
Okay. I felt like I had to ask the question. Mike, you have another question?
Yeah, on the question of just the new streets and the funding, I assume developers will probably pay for maybe part of the construction of new roads, but there will be, as I said, ongoing maintenance issues. And I'm wondering if you thought about limiting access to these streets to these delivery trucks you talked about, as well as bikes and pedestrians on any of these streets.
You know, we have a couple of examples that are really more just short sort of stub, not even cul-de-sac type of access roads that are identified that would serve a more limited vehicular capacity for obviously emergency access or other types of deliveries, you know, and those kinds of things as sort of back of house access to parking garages, et cetera. For the most part, though, the few additional road connections that we have included would ultimately be public right of way. They would be, you know, built to our city standards. That initial construction is funded and often constructed as part of redevelopment projects, and so that is a burden that's borne by the developer. But then ultimately, that maintenance does fall to the city. And Valerie, you can certainly correct me if I have that wrong.
That's also my understanding. And, you know, I think, Mike, to your question, it's really probably not the linear feet that's going to make or break a maintenance budget, but it is a concern or a consideration to think about, and weighing and balancing the benefits of, you know, the future redevelopment potential of the area under the plan.
One thing I might just mention too, Mike, just in terms of the character of these streets. So all of the connections that are identified are of the you know, the smallest sort of local street cross section width. So there's no, you know, there's no collector arterials that are being proposed. So these would all be very, very small scale, you know, low speed types of streets. They also in the form-based code, so for the architectural design and the redevelopment design, there's a number of standards that relate to the experience at the street level. So adding in a lot of additional new opportunities for pedestrian spaces and courtyards and mobility hubs and all that, all the other types of infrastructure that we want to see at our ground level, because for the most part, you know, anybody visiting the area is going to be experiencing at that level. There's only a select group that would either be living or working in these spaces. So we're really trying to focus on, even if it is a street that carries vehicles, we're really focused on what is that bike and pedestrian experience along there, and making sure that it's safe and enjoyable.
Glad to hear that. Thanks.
Yeah, so in the memo, for instance, you describe a connection 1M as being built as a paseo. Can you speak to a little bit more to that?
Yeah, and Kathleen, I'll let you. Why don't I let you start? I'll chime in because I've got some additional information on the west side of Foothills from Boulder Junction that I think adds some context.
Yeah, that's what I was going to reference. If you've been to Boulder Junction, and you've seen the pedestrian-oriented pathways that run through those neighborhoods that have the kind of special paving or unique pavers, a lot of landscaping, those are the paseos. And so they are, their design requirements are outlined in the form-based code, and they are intended to create additional kind of they count towards our open space requirements. So they come with a higher quality of pedestrian environment than maybe some of the more typical kind of like sidewalk facility.
Yeah, that's right. And generally, they do also provide for required or necessary emergency access as well. So there's, you know, they differ in scale and size, but as Kathleen mentioned, they are you know, intended to be this higher level enhanced pedestrian environment and really only carry, you know, bikes and peds and only very limited vehicle access if needed. The other thing I was going to mention was just that on the west side of Foothills Parkway, also along the Goose Creek Greenway, as part of a recent amendment to the Transit Village Area Plan, which applies to all of Boulder Junction. We've also proposed some additional paseos along the Goose Creek Greenway to, you know, sort of supplement the existing multi-use path that is there, and create a bit more of an interactive type of experience between any new development and any ground floor types of uses and those enhanced pedestrian areas. So really our goal is to try to extend that through and under, you know, Foothills Parkway and then onto this east side as well.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the bridge because I'm not quite understanding, you were thinking of building a second bridge, decided not to do that. And I don't want to discourage you from rededicating the existing bridge to ped bike access. I strongly in favor of that. I'm just confused about the decommissioning of motor vehicle access, I suppose. You talk about more robust vehicle access on 47th Street. But are we thinking we need to rebuild the bridge or reconfigure the bridge to dedicate it to bike and ped? Are we talking, you know, is it likely that the bridge will now not need as much maintenance or repair because it's not, the loads are just not going to be the same? I'm just not really confident I understand what was behind that decision.
So if you're on the south side of that bridge today and you drive over it into the north side, you're not connecting to a street. You're
Right.
in this
You're a
kind of
parking lot.
Netherland parking lot and
Right.
you make your way through. So that vehicular connection today isn't really a formal connection. There is no street that happens there. And in the regulating plan and the form-based code and what we are envisioning on that north side of Goose Creek is a really pedestrian oriented walkway where we have these south facing storefronts. And if you're standing there, you have these great views out to the Flatirons. And so that kind of haphazard make your way through in a car parking lot will no longer exist in the long-term future. It's intended to be that pedestrian way. So that revision, I guess, of the existing to the planned space sort of removes the opportunity for a car to even connect to any other vehicular access at that point.
Okay.
And then as far as the transition of the bridge and the kind of maintenance requirements with that or what that looks like, I might look to Jean or Valerie.
Right. Yeah. I think, Jean, you might have been a little bit closer to the considerations around this location. But, you know, with the existing bridge structure, obviously having less weight load on that will mean less wear and tear over time of that structure. I think, you know, taking on the provision of an entirely new bridge structure, its design, construction, and then ongoing maintenance is something that we considered and weighed carefully, but is not really a financial commitment that we can make at this time. So the strategy that this team is describing with the existing bridge was really the way to address the connectivity that, you know, I think Christopher and Kathleen have been talking about, really making sure there are those fine-grained pedestrian and bike-friendly connections throughout the project area there. Jean, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think you covered it well, Valerie. Thank you.
Yeah, that clarifies it for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So there's no formal ask of TAB tonight. You were just here for sort of feedback and reactions. Does anyone else have anything to add to the discussion that you would like this team to come away with before they talk to planning board?
I just want to say thank you to Kathleen and Christopher for your kind of vision and your long work on this project. And I think this is an amazing vision. I'm looking forward to having more of those kind of paseo and pedestrian and bike friendly areas in this part of Boulder. And I'm excited about the vision that you're creating here and putting out there. Thank you.
Thank you. That seems like that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you
Right,
so
yeah.
much for having us. Nice to see
Appreciate
everybody.
it. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
You too. All right. Well, we are ready to head now to the public hearing and TAB recommendation about the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvements Project. Normally the way that this goes for a public hearing is we will have a presentation by staff followed by clarifying questions from TAB, and then we will open it up to members of the public to speak to TAB before then turning back to TAB discussion on the requested action. So we will turn it over to staff.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Tila. And before we get started, I just want to say a few words just to introduce this big item tonight. Again, I'm Valerie Watson, Interim Director, Transportation and Mobility. Tonight, we're so pleased to bring this item forward to TAB. It represents not just the next big milestone for this project, but also for the overall core arterial network and Vision Zero initiatives. I could not be more proud of the body of work behind the materials that you have received in your packet. I'm especially proud of the tireless efforts of city staff and grateful for the time that our community has invested in this process to identify a recommended design alternative. And that's one that balances multiple design considerations, the city's policy framework, and community priorities. Carefully considering the benefits and trade-offs is so important on arterial streets like Iris Avenue, where we see a disproportionate number of severe crashes occurring citywide, and where the risk for the common types of crashes to occur in the future is the highest. This work you will consider this evening is rooted not just in our community's Vision Zero commitment, but also in our community's climate commitment as well. And that climate commitment aims to create a resilient, sustainable collection of neighborhoods that are interconnected with convenient and reliable transportation choices. Before I turn it over to the team, I wanted to express thanks to you all as TAB members for your feedback and guidance over the last couple of years on not just this project, but the CAN initiative as a whole, and your participation in so many of our community engagement activities. And also, thanks to your thoughtful deliberation of the SEEP evaluation and recommendation, you know, all 100 or so pages that you've been reading. So our team has worked really hard to prepare a presentation for you with the highlights and visual illustrations to bring it all to life as you consider your recommendation tonight. And with that, I'll hand it over to Stephen.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, Valerie. And just need to start by echoing your sentiment that a considerable amount of time, effort, and hard work from city staff and the community went into this project so far and has shaped the staff recommendation alternative that we're here to speak about today. So with that, my name is Stephen Rijo, Transportation Planning Manager with Transportation and Mobility. I'm joined today by Lindsay Mers, Civil Engineering Manager and PM for the Iris Avenue project, in addition to several other key team members to support with the Q&A. So we're here today to speak about the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvement Project and the Community and Environmental Assessment Process, or SEEP as we will refer to it, that we just completed to produce the staff recommendation that we're asking for your recommendation on today. Next slide, please. So you can see a general overview of what we'll discuss tonight, start with some background on the project, then provide an overview of our design and community engagement process. Next, transition to the meat of the discussion, which is the SEEP, the general process for that and working through the project-specific recommendation criteria. And then we'll finish with a summary and next steps before asking for your recommendation. So realize we've put a lot into the next 30 minutes and look forward to a Q&A afterwards. Next slide, please. So I did want to start tonight with an overview of the project process to date. As many of you know, we started in 2023 with corridor analysis, involved a lot of analysis, extensive community engagement to understand what was working on the corridor and what needed improvements. In the early months of 2024, shifted our focus to initial screening and alternatives development. So really exploring all the possibly feasible alternatives for Iris Avenue, weighing them based on feedback and project goals. In the spring and summer of this year, we shared the conceptual alternatives for feedback before embarking on this SEEP process to identify the staff recommended alternative. And then as you see highlighted there, we're here today to present on that staff recommended alternative. And then afterwards, we'll go to City Council, at which point, if they support it, we would shift to the final design phase of this project. And in saying that, I did want to take a moment to speak about how we're at that phase where the project shifts from conceptual design to final design, and that there's a level of detail and decision-making that sort of flows with that change. So example of decisions that will be made in final design are all the minor details around roadway design. I'm talking about things like curb radii or specific signal operations, all the way to some detailed design decisions around things like
the barrier type or exactly what sidewalk improvements might look like or trash collection or things like that could work like. So want to just be clear that the team has spent time exploring that feasibility, has some ideas to advance in final design, but has not embarked on that work yet because we are currently in conceptual design. Next slide, please. So after discussing timeline, just wanted to reiterate the policy framework that really is the foundation we've built this project on. And so you've seen these before. I don't want to spend too much time speaking to it, but do think it's important to start with the project's policies framework that have informed the work we are here to talk about today. Next slide, please. And so, again, another topic folks here should be no strangers to, but wanted to highlight how the Core Arterial Network, or CAN, which was prioritized by City Council in 2022, is something that informs this work and really focuses multimodal safety improvements on a network of arterial streets that make up a small percentage of the city's roadway network, but have a disproportionate number of crashes. So this means that targeted improvements to those streets can have really network-wide benefits for connectivity and safety, and also highlighting that Iris falls on the Vision Zero Action Plan's high-risk network, meaning that it has some risk factors that we're mitigating to improve long-term safety on the corridor. Next slide, please. So then after reviewing, those past plans, policies, existing conditions data, performed analysis of, all the things you see on the screen right now, that really, informed and really were the data that we vetted to get to the conceptual alternatives that we'll chat about a little bit here. Next slide, please. So wanted to take a moment to talk about another key input that informed our work here, which is best practices and professional guidance around roadway reconfiguration. So the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, provides guidance for roadway reconfigurations that can help reduce common crash types seen on 4-lane roadways across the country while improving multimodal safety for all. The FHWA also provides guidance around the types of roads that are strong candidates for roadway reconfigurations, of which Iris fits into. Also wanted to call out that there are several stretches of roadway in Boulder today that carry similar levels of traffic on 3-lane roadways. And so you can see them listed there, stretches of Arapahoe, Folsom, or Arapahoe, Valmont, and 28th. And so, ultimately it's the ability to reduce speeding and crashes by up to 47%, which is the key reason why we're looking at a roadway reconfiguration for Iris Avenue. Next slide, please. So the next and one of the really key inputs to our work on this corridor was community feedback. And while Valerie mentioned this earlier, definitely want to reiterate again that this was one of the more robust engagement processes that I've been a part of, and provided ample opportunities in different forums and types, technologies for folks to learn about the project and provide their feedback with staff and consultants. You can see the items listed above that speak to sort of the types of events we held and the number of folks reached, and just all the great photos from working with the community to better understand people's needs, concerns, and opportunities for this corridor. And so I do want to highlight, it always takes a lot of partnership from the community. And I know I speak for the team when I say that we're really grateful for the level of effort that folks brought to this work. Next slide, please. So through all that engagement, we've really gotten a pulse for the community's priorities for this project. Here you can see the results of a questionnaire that we distributed at our April engagement push. You can see the community priorities that the team organized into high, medium, and low priority buckets. The team has heard similar themes since starting the work back in 2023, and it's really helpful to both see them reinforced and then see how they're prioritized by the community. Next slide. Also wanted to share a brief update on our most recent engagement at a July in-person virtual open house, virtual and in-person house, forgive me there. Here, the city staff unveiled their recommended alternative, asked about how well folks understood the alternative, and then confirmed what themes they were most excited about, as we asked in the questionnaire. And so again, helpful to see folks organizing their priorities similarly now as they were a few months ago, as they were earlier in the year and last year. And again, just gave the team confidence that they had a strong understanding of community priorities as they wrap up the alternatives analysis and conceptual design phase of the project, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So all those themes influenced how we assess the alternatives. We created the 5 buckets that you see on the screen right now that were really the considerations that we use to evaluate the alternatives at each key project milestone. And they've really guided our analysis ever since. Next slide, please. So with all that background on the project, can shift to what we're here to talk about today, which is the Community Environmental Assessment Process, or CEAP, which is Boulder's formal review process that assesses the potential impacts of capital improvement projects to help select the best conceptual design alternative. The CEAP uses the established CEAP goals assessment, checklist questions, and then the team also supplemented those with project-specific evaluation criteria and community input to recommend to get to the staff recommended alternative that we'll be chatting about today. Next slide, please. Just wanted to quickly highlight that the CEAP is meant to support and advance the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan planning priorities. And as we ran the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvement Project through that checklist and those Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan goals, it directly or indirectly supported all the ones you see listed there today, which was very encouraging. Next slide, please. And so then truly after all that background work, the team produced the following 4 alternatives that were technically feasible for Iris Avenue. They are 2 permutations that have 3-lane roadways, 2 permutations that have 4-lane roadways, and then iterations that have directional protected bike lanes and 2-way protected bike lanes on the north side of the street. And just wanted to give folks a visual of all 4 alternatives that we evaluated through the CEAP document before we spend a lot of our time tonight talking about the staff recommended alternative. Next slide, please. So also wanted to quickly run you through the CEAP checklist before we get into a little bit more detail here. It generally scores the alternatives, and as you can see, based on the amount of green for A and B and some more red for C and D, that it really kind of elevates A and B while lowering C and D as alternatives. You can see that there isn't a ton of differentiation between the scores on A and B and then C and D, which is a large part of why the team spent so much time on the project-specific evaluation criteria. But quickly running through these for the group's benefit, as we look at the need for additional transportation improvements, this doesn't expand, capacity needs and therefore scored positively for A and B. The need for additional police and fire services, the hope is that A and B would actually reduce the need for emergency day-to-day response responding to crashes. So scored positively for A and B, neutral for C and D. When you look at effects on special populations, the way it improves safety for folks scored highly across all options. Then when you really get into the environmental factors that you see, those next few there, A and B scored neutrally for most of them because they are not widening the roadway, causing new impacts to a lot of those environmental resources, while C and D did because they were widening one or both sides of the roadway, with the exception being air quality, as both options do pose benefits for air quality for various reasons. And then kind of rounding out the last 2, exposure to excessive noise was one where A and B were neutral. C and D scored negatively due to those construction impacts. And then lastly, the economic vitality and ability to use existing infrastructures was one where A and B scored positively and C and D scored negatively. So you can see that this is a bit of a crude output for the project, which again is why we came up with the project-specific evaluation criteria. On the next slide, please. So then again, this is another one I'll run through quickly because it's what Lindsay will be spending most of her time speaking to, but did just want to highlight how this, again, you can see kind of the green, the neutrals, the reds on this score, and mostly want to call out how it really helped us start to differentiate between A and B, C and D, and the 4 options. And I think the other point I really wanted to make on this slide was how the alternatives, some score better on certain considerations that you see on the left there, while some do better on other considerations and other areas. And so kind of seeing the entire evaluation on one page highlights how there are key trade-offs in these alternatives that maybe advance certain considerations more than others. And the project team did a really, thoughtful job of trying to come with the alternatives that provide the biggest benefit across the most considerations. So next slide, and that'll be my last bit for tonight. So with that, did want to, for the group's benefit, share what the recommended alternative was, which is alternative B, as referenced in a lot of our materials. That is the 3-lane roadway with a 2-way protected bike lane on the north side, adding a center turn lane in the middle. Again, plenty more slides on alternative B, but did want to make sure folks were aware of the selection as Lindsay steps through her slides. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Lindsay Mers, Civil Engineering Manager and PM for the project, to give you all a walking tour of the SEEP and provide specific evaluation criteria. So with that, I'll let you take it away.
The next slide, yeah. So thanks, Stephen. So hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Mers, a Civil Engineering Project Manager. I'll be continuing the review for the scoring of the alternatives. And so one of the top priorities is to make sure everyone stays safe on the roads, no matter what transportation mode you choose to use. So through the engagement process, we heard from the community that they're concerned about how unsafe IRIS feels right now, and there's a need to slow down speeding and to reduce the number of crashes. And the data and the plans, like Stephen mentioned, the TMP and the VZAP, they back up those concerns. So alternative B scores high for traffic safety because it includes changes like adding the 2-way protected bike lane and reducing the number of travel lanes from 4 to 3. These changes can help lower the speed by up to 7 miles per hour, which is important because existing conditions show that drivers are speeding on sections of Iris Avenue. So besides slowing down traffic to make crashes less severe and less frequent, the design changes are expected to cut common types of crashes by as much as half. And these are illustrated on the images on the slide. So the change from 4 lanes to 3 lanes will lower the chances of the rear end, the side swipe, and the broadside vehicle crashes, as well as reduce the pedestrian and bicyclist crashes. And that's due to the protection and then the separation for walkers and bikers up to and through the protected intersections. And so while we often emphasize how these changes are going to benefit the vulnerable road users, it's also important to note that the drivers who do have the most crashes in this area will also see significant safety improvements. Next slide. So the next area to consider is how the traffic operates, especially travel time, because IRIS is an important east-west route. Option B mostly has neutral scores for traffic operations because it tries to balance vehicle access and capacity with the safety improvements for everyone. So there are trade-offs between faster travel times and safety. So right now, the existing speeding makes travel times seem shorter, but then it increases the risk. So if we reduce the speeds, we're going to naturally add some travel time as the reconfiguration of the roadway reduces that safety risk. So the proposed safety improvements, like the dedicated bike signals, it may cause some delays for drivers, but make the road safer for cyclists and pedestrians. Option B aims to improve safety while keeping travel time changes to a minimum, which was balanced by maintaining the existing lane configuration at each bookend of the corridor, which we're going to review shortly. So we measured the current travel times and we created the models to predict the future travel times. And this is what our analysis found. On average, trips might be delayed 3 to 46 seconds. For most trips, 95% of them, delays could range from 2 to 58 seconds. And the slowest 5% of trips could face delays between 1 second and 2 minutes and 9 seconds. So this means that for a majority of the trips, delays will be less than a minute. And similar to what people experience today, however, during the most congested times, some trips might be delayed by a few minutes. And so will folks notice this? Maybe. Is it worth the safety benefits? Certainly. And so the project team believes that these trade-offs are important for making the corridor safer while keeping travel times reliable. Next slide. So let's discuss why the bookends are so important. Our analysis showed that if we had extended the 3-lane configuration all the way to Broadway and 28th, the resulting delays would have been too severe, and we didn't want to do that. So we decided to keep the existing lane configurations at these key points. Instead, we're focusing on targeted improvements to enhance safety for everyone. So this graphic illustrates the proposed lane configuration. The changes are centered to the middle section of the corridor between 13th and 26th Folsom, which is marked in black. And it shows a new turn lanes at 19th Street to improve that traffic flow. Importantly, the lane configuration remains unchanged west of 13th and east of 26 Folsom, and this decision is crucial for maintaining consistent travel times for vehicles throughout the corridor. The proposed design is similar to Arapahoe Avenue between Broadway and 28th, so just think about that section. So there's additional vehicle lanes that provide access to the businesses at the eastern end. And while the number of travel lanes are then reduced in the residential areas to improve safety and reduce speeding near that school and those businesses, and then we add the extra lanes again at Broadway to facilitate those smooth turning movements. So I encourage you to drive and walk this section of Arapahoe to experience firsthand how the 3-lane setup helps prevent speeding and ensures reliable traffic flow. Next slide. So as mentioned in the preceding slides, the vehicle lane configuration would not change at the intersection of Broadway, highlighted in the map in yellow. However, there will be improvements made to provide protection and safety for the pedestrians and bicycles. The 2-way protected bike lanes will extend all the way to the intersection to make direct connection to the path that continues west to Foothills Elementary and the Newlands neighborhood. Other design elements at the bookends include optimized signals and dedicated bike signals and pedestrian phases, which is similar today when the vehicle movements get held so that peds are able to cross. The westbound transit stop will also be upgraded to a shared bus stop, and it'll provide a larger boarding area and accommodate the protected bike lanes. Next. So at 28th Street, highlighted in yellow, the vehicle lane configuration is also not proposed to change. So east of Elmer's 2-mile underpass, the 2-way protected bike lanes on the north side are going to transition to a 2-way sidewalk level facility to provide direct connections to that shopping center, the transit stops, the 28th Street paths, routes to Wonderland Creek Greenway, and then the planned diagonal bikeway. A 2-way sidewalk level facility is also added to the south side so that Elmer's 2-mile underpass can be used to access businesses and 28th Street on both sides of the road without having to cross the street at grade. The 2-way bike lanes are separated from the adjacent sidewalk with a 1-foot buffer. So the driveways will also be reconstructed to meet current standards, and that westbound left into the Safeway parking lot will be prohibited due to recurring left turn crashes. But the project team will continue to coordinate with those stakeholders and business owners as we move forward. Next slide. So now that we've covered travel times and the role of the bookends, we'll look at how the design improves turning and emergency response. So the center turn lane helps by reducing rear end and approach turn crashes, which are 2 of our most common crash types, and it keeps traffic flowing smoothly. So it allows cars waiting to turn left to move out of the through lane so that drivers going straight don't get struck behind them. And this makes turns feel less rushed and more predictable. Additionally, the design includes signal changes that are going to separate the bike and ped crossings from the vehicle turns. And this separation reduces those conflicts at major intersections, making it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. So for emergency response, that center turn lane offers a clear, predictable space for first responders. It provides a dedicated area for emergency vehicles to pass, improving their response times. The design maintains the 4 lanes of capacity to support disaster scenarios. So in the event of an emergency, like a wildfire evacuation, the center lane can serve as an extra eastbound evacuation route, while the protected bike lane can be utilized by first responders for westbound travel. And this setup preserves the current level of disaster response capability, but we'll continue to collaborate with Boulder Fire Rescue, with police, and with the Office of Disaster Management as we move forward. Next slide. The final aspect of transportation operations is how the changes to Iris Avenue might affect the neighborhood streets. And so we have received feedback from residents worried about traffic being diverted and speeding on the nearby streets because of the Iris Avenue changes. And so to address these concerns, we did collect data on the current speeds and the traffic counts. And this data will help guide a traffic calming project that's going to be implemented alongside the Iris Avenue improvements. And this map shows which are being considered for traffic calming and which ones we'll keep monitoring. Next slide. So the next, the next evaluation criteria focus on creating safe and comfortable connections, which was a top priority for the community. As indicated by the high scores in green, Alternative B performs well in this criteria. Along with the safety and operational improvements, the redesign of Iris Avenue also makes space for enhancements that focus on comfort for biking and walking. So key features like those 2-way protected bike lanes, the center turn lane, The protected intersections, the improved transit stops, and the safe pedestrian crossings all contribute to a better experience for those walking and biking. So alternative B will shift the eastbound travel lane closer to the south side sidewalk, but the reconfiguration of the travel lanes from 4 to 3 lanes will reduce the speeding along Iris. That would help to maintain that comfortable sidewalk environment as folks are making the short connections along the south side so that they can access the two-way protected bike lanes on the north side. Additionally, the city's going to address existing issues by making sidewalk improvements, including reconstructing curb ramps, replacing deteriorating sidewalk. We're going to look for opportunities to widen or even straighten out the sidewalk where feasible, and we're going to remove sightline obstacles. And these upgrades will be finalized during the final design phase to ensure they fully address any current shortcomings. Next slide. So this is an illustrative rendering of Folsom 26 intersection. So this is showing the protected corner islands and the enhanced transit stop. These design elements not only reduce conflicts between cyclist drivers and bus passengers, but they make the crossing safer and more comfortable for pedestrians. So by shortening the crossing distance, these features minimize the times that pedestrians are spending in the roadway, which would improve safety and comfort. Separate signal phases for pedestrian cyclists, as mentioned earlier, will also contribute to smoother and safer crossing experience. Next slide. So alternative B enhances walking and biking safety and comfort by converting a vehicle lane into space for protected bike lanes and protected intersection features. While both one-way and two-way protected bike lanes offer safety benefits, the two-way protected bike lane is the most suitable for Iris Avenue based on community feedback, citywide objectives, and best practices. Now, here's why a two-way protected bike lane is the optimal choice for Iris Avenue. So there's fewer conflicts. So the north side of Iris has 13 conflict points, like driveways and side streets. The south side has 34. So this significant reduction in conflict points, it's easier to build it, it's easier to maintain it. It means fewer risks for cyclists, making the north side more comfortable and safer. There's increased accessibility. A two-way protected bike lane with its extra width and buffer accommodates side-by-side riding and safe passing, which is important with the rise of e-bikes and, families who ride along and across Iris to bring their kids to and from schools and then the local daycares. Emergency response benefits. The two-way protected bike lane is wide enough to accommodate emergency vehicles during evacuations, and in emergencies, the center turn lane can be used as the additional eastbound lane. Maintenance efficiency. So the two-way protected bike lane is easier and cheaper to maintain. It can be serviced with our standard equipment, and it benefits from the northern sunlight for quicker snow melting. There's minimal travel time impact. So compared to directional protected bike lanes, the two-way design has a lesser impact on travel times. So this is largely due to the fact that the one-way protected bike lanes provide a separated signal phasing to reduce the conflicts between drivers and people walking, biking. And so that leads to less east-west green time for vehicles. And so that makes travel time slightly longer for the one-way protected bike lanes versus the two-way. And then finally, there's improved connections. So the two-way protected bike lane provides optimal access to key areas at the ends of the corridor. Next slide. So building off the last slide, I want to address a frequently asked question about how this project will design the conflict points between bicyclists that are on the two-way protected bike lane and vehicles turning across the protected bike lane who may not expect the two-way bike traffic despite having to look both ways for pedestrians. So potential treatments used in Denver and other Northern American peer cities, as shown here, are features such as protected intersection elements, the two-way signs and markings, raised crossings, removing sightline obstructions, striping and signal changes that separate vehicle and bike movements at major intersections. So the project team will continue to develop industry best practice design treatments and final design, but these options were considered by the project team for the recommendation of alternative B, since the reconfiguration from 4 lanes to 3 lanes create conditions in which drivers are only looking across 1 lane of traffic and not 2. The speeds will be slower, and that center turn lane provides the space for turning vehicles to pause, look, and then continue their turning movement. So next slide. So now for the fun one. Let's take a look at some example bicycle trips to illustrate how people would use the north side two-way protected bike lane. So we'll animate each route in the simplified corridor map, which includes connecting north-south bike routes. So in our first example, We're gonna follow a parent biking north on Elmer's 2-mile path who needs to get to Foothills Elementary for drop off or pickup. At Iris Avenue, they use the underpass to cross under the street and access the two-way protected bike lane. Turning west, they then navigate through the bicycle signal phases at Folsom 26th and 19th. The bike lane provides a direct route along Iris, allowing them to reach the multi-use path west of Broadway that leads directly to Foothills Elementary. So our second example focuses on a regional bike trip to downtown Boulder. We'll imagine someone living on Colorado 119 taking this trip after CDOT and Boulder County complete the Diagonal Bikeway project in 2027. So for the most direct route to downtown, the bikeway will lead them to the Iris Avenue 28th intersection. After crossing, they use the two-way protected bike lane to head west to the enhanced crossing at 15th Street. And now recall this two-way facility has extra width, a 5-foot buffer from vehicle traffic, and minimal conflict points on the north side, which supports riders of all ages and abilities. So from there, the 15th Street will then link up to the 13th Street neighborhood Green Street, which leads straight to downtown. So let's keep the fun going and let's consider 2 eastbound trips. So first, imagine someone living at the west end of the corridor who commutes to a job in Boulder Junction or East Boulder. So starting in the neighborhood south of Iris Avenue along Hawthorne, they backtrack slightly to use the improved crossing at 15th to access the two-way protected bike lane. Then they continue east through the both protected intersections, and they're going to use Elmer's 2-mile path underpass for that comfortable transition that's going to take them back to the south side. So from there, they're going to travel along a short section of the sidewalk level two-way protected bike lane proposed as part of the bookend improvements until they reach the intersection with 28th Street. After crossing, they'll take the existing multi-use path to East Iris Avenue, a designated bike route that connects directly with the Wonderland Creek path to reach East Boulder, and the TIP and Safe Streets for All funded North 30th Street CAN project to reach Boulder Junction. So finally, let's travel from North Boulder to Safeway to pick up some groceries. After heading south to the protected intersection at Iris and 19th, they'll wait at the northwest corner island for a green bicycle signal before continuing east. The bicycle signal separates the two-way bike traffic from vehicle turning movements at major intersections. The north side between 19th and Elmer's 2-mile path has only 2 unsignalized conflict points, a side street intersection and a residential driveway. They're going to ride through the underpass to cross to the south side. Then they're going to use one of the reconstructed driveways to enter the Safeway parking lots. Next slide. So preserving the tree canopy was a key community priority, and one of the benefits of the staff recommended alternative is that it minimizes the impact on trees by avoiding roadway widening. And so alternative B preserved 90% of our existing public trees, removing approximately 10 to 12 out of the 150 trees, which does closely maintain our existing tree canopy. The trees that would be removed are to improve sightlines and to accommodate sidewalk improvements. Next slide. So implementation feasibility is an important project criteria, and alternative B enhances safety while fitting within the existing 50-foot roadway width. Now this will result in fewer impacts behind the curbs. The design requires fewer private property easements. I'm going to affect fewer existing utilities, and the two-way protected bike lane on the north side means half the amount of vertical infrastructure and fewer shared transit stops have to be constructed and maintained, which will make the project less costly and I can implement it more swiftly. And recently completed projects like Baseline provide early estimates for how much alternative B could cost, which was around $5 million in today's dollars. Next slide. So after discussing all of these project-specific evaluation criteria, here are the scores for each alternative. So alternatives A and B both score higher compared to alternatives C and D, reflecting their greater overall benefit. Now, notably, alternative B surpasses alternative A, providing the highest level of benefit according to our evaluation criteria. This suggests that alternative B offers the most significant improvements across the various criteria. Next. So let's look at some more renderings. So these renderings illustrate what the staff recommended alternative could look like when you're looking west from 19th Street. So many of the key design elements that have been discussed tonight can be seen here, but a few worth reiterating. So these include the center turn lane helps reduce common types of vehicle crashes. It's going to aid in smoother turns into and out of the side streets and driveways and offers a dedicated space for emergency responders. As stated earlier, the trees are preserved, adjusting signals to separate the turning vehicles from peds and bikes and major intersections is going to enhance the safety for bikers. and has a smaller effect on vehicle travel times compared to our one-way protected bike lanes. The dedicated eastbound turn lane onto southbound 19th Street. We're not widening the roadway. It's going to cost less, take less time, minimize property impacts. The two-way protected bike lane supports riders of all ages and abilities, disaster emergency response, and year-round maintenance. The transit boarding islands eliminates those conflicts between buses and people biking and shortens the distance to cross Iris. Corner islands reduce the risk of crashes because we're going to physically separate people walking and biking from those vehicles. And then we're also going to shorten the crossings for bikes and peds. So it should be noted that the vertical separation material for the protected bike lanes and raised transit boarding islands will be determined in final design because I have to get detailed floodplain analysis. So one more rendering and then I'll be done. Here is another perspective that provides a view of the protected bike lane and highlights various protected intersection elements in greater detail. You can see some of these elements. Some of them are designed to be mountable, which is going to allow trucks and emergency vehicles to navigate through them if needed. And additionally, this view illustrates how the transit stop improvements effectively manage the flow of bikes and bus riders, ensuring an organized and efficient space for all users. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Stephen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that info, Lindsay. Super informative. And so with that, I'll close us out with a brief summary before discussing next steps and moving to the TAB recommendation. So a quick summary is that, as we discussed, alternative B is the staff recommendation, and that this recommendation was informed by, a robust public process that, really focused on safety improvements in addition to, providing that end-to-end protected bike lane. And so with that, the SEEP checklist and project-specific evaluation criteria influence the staff recommendation, and ultimately we'll be asking for your motion to support the staff recommendation to City Council. Next slide, please. So with that, you can see the next steps, immediate next steps on the slide there. Today, we're at Transportation Advisory Board, looking for your recommendation. Then we will be at Council on the 19th, which is where we will bring forward the TAB recommendation and see if the project is called up or not. If it is called up, we will then be in front of Council in October. And then depending how those steps go, fall onwards is when we would transition into the final design process. So next slide, please. So I think, again, with all of that, this is our last slide, and just wanted to repeat, the official language here that staff is seeking a recommendation to the City Council regarding the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvements Project, SEEP. Findings will be presented to City Council for acceptance at their September 19th, 2024 meeting. So with that, thank you for the time. Thanks for sitting through a lot of info there, and happy to answer any clarifying questions before getting into the next steps of this agenda item. So thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you so much. That was a lot. So as I mentioned this morning or before this began, this is a good time for clarifying questions from TAB before we open it up for the public hearing. So does anyone have any questions on the presentation or the SEEP process?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I see in the presentation that the lane widths for alternative B, 11 feet for the driving lanes and 10 feet for the center turn lanes. Could you tell us what the existing lane widths are on Iris?
I'm going to, oh, Garrett, are you with us? Oh, he might still be connecting. I'm gonna see if Devin Joslin is available to speak to the existing lane widths on the street. And I might ask if we could just take down the presentation PowerPoint so that we can navigate the question and answer together.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Devin Joslin. I'm the city's principal traffic engineer. Iris currently has a curb-to-curb width of 50 feet, and that is made up of 4 10-foot travel lanes and 2 5-foot bike lanes.
Thank you.
Other questions at this point?
I don't have a
Uh,
question. I just
Go
want
ahead,
to
Trudy.
commend, yeah, I just want to commend the city and
Okay.
this everybody and just thank you so much for all this work. I can't believe we're finally here.
I have a couple of questions. I think you were very clear, by the way, in telling us kind of where we're at. We're at the conceptual design phase. There's definitely a lot of nitty-gritty details. I'm pleased that you mentioned trash collection and sidewalk improvements, and that those are, you know, still to come and still part of this process. Do we have an idea of the timeline for final design and when we might actually see this as you know, a reality on the road? I understand that there might be a couple of phases. And so when would we see sort of the majority of the changes happen? And when would we see the final result, do we think?
Right. So maybe let's start with talking about the timeline for final design. And so that would be assuming that we have a decision by TAB and City Council by the end of October of this year. So I might ask if Lindsay Mers, our project manager, could speak to a typical just general timeline for a final design phase for a project of this scope. And then we'll take on the second part of your question, Tila, after that.
You haven't stumped me because I've done this so many times, but yeah, so once again, assuming we can get council in October, we are planning to start final design pretty quickly, and that is the plan. So there's a lot of data to still actually collect, and then there's some permitting that has to be done. My gut is immediately going to approximately 18 months. Garrett might want to correct me, but if I had to pick my gut number, I would say 18 months, of course, assuming everything goes well, but that's what I would probably originally schedule out in my first schedule.
Right, thanks, Lindsay. And then Tila, the second part of your question was, really after final design is complete, what are the next critical path items before you would be able to start procurement and construction? And, really what we have is, a funding strategy for our big CAN corridors where we use some of our local dollars to go after grants to fund projects such as DRCOG TIP, Transportation Improvement Program funds. And so what we would do is sync up the timeline of our project process after this point to make sure that we're prepared and ready for the next call for projects for that or similar funding opportunities. So we're keeping our eyes out for that. After that time, if funding is awarded, then usually there's a timeline associated with that grant funding that then determines how we can, anticipate eventual construction. So that would be the next steps. Garrett's here. Thank you for joining. Is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
No, I think you covered it well as far as the overall timeline. Thank you.
Okay. And then just to be clear, while staff is beginning the final design work, identifying sort of those funding opportunities would happen in parallel. Is that right?
That's right. The cycles for grant opportunities don't always happen at the exact same time. And so we, try to keep in touch with the different agencies around the region just to make sure we know when to anticipate those once they have more information to share. So we've had a lot of success in the past at pursuing grants for CAN corridors, as you've seen with phase 2 of baseline, which is in design at this time. So that is what we would be, really looking out for, is that landscape of grants and being ready. And the project process to date, with all of the conceptual design, community engagement, advancing to this point, is what sets us up to be eligible to compete for those types of grant funds. So we are on that path as we speak.
Okay, thank you. My last question, I appreciated the analysis about traffic flow, throughput, trip times, and delays over the current too fast, speedy, kind of unnecessary road width issues. Do we have any information about the reliability of trip times, or is that kind of what that 95th percent number is supposed to capture? I think that the memo said, you know, an average trip is between 4 and 5 minutes. Right now, it's kind of between 4 minutes, 14 seconds and 4 minutes and 58 seconds or something, which is a, you know, pretty narrow bandwidth. The drivers at a particular time of day who are regularly using it kind of know what to expect. Do we understand that this project would kind of lead to reliable travel times, or do we have any information on sort of the reliability of the everyday trip?
Right, that's such a great question, Tila. You know, you're noting that there are these kind of pretty big ranges in the table that shows those different breakdowns. I'd like to invite one of our consultant team members, Gregory Baker from HDR, if he's available, to speak to that that question that Tila has about noting that variability. How do we then interpret that data to know how reliable travel times would be for the majority of trips?
Hi, good evening. Greg Baker with HDR, consultant on the project. So we have done some analysis that takes the existing data, and we run some traffic models that look at that data with our proposed design. And yes, we see that the travel times do increase a little bit, but in terms of reliability, we're not expecting there to be much of a change in that. That's where that 95th percentile of trips. So that's most people making trips, still being able to meet that with just like an extra minute of travel time. And by time of day is like the critical thing for your reliability. So, you know, if you're using the corridor on a regular basis, you probably use it at a similar time of day. And so you'll see the same trip time, although it'll be slightly longer than it is in the current situation. It'll be a similar time every day that you make that trip at that time of day. That's the expectation. And a lot of that is controlled by the volume of traffic, the traffic signal timing, and making sure that the corridor, or understanding that the corridor isn't over congested, is what we're seeing from our analysis. So there isn't an issue with too much traffic. It's just that traffic is traveling slightly slower because of the changing conditions of the design.
Okay, thank you. Is there I don't know this offhand, but I'm going to guess that there is information about other 4-lane to 3-lane conversions that is sort of supporting your conclusions here. Is that fair? And where would those peer projects be?
Greg, would you like to speak to that? And any other team members, feel free to jump in.
I can speak to that. I mean, there are peer projects that the FHWA, so the Federal Highways Administration, uses when they publish their documents and their like the background information that they have studied before and after. The challenge obviously is that each location is different. I mean, each street has its own individual nuances that mean that it's very hard to make an apples to apples comparison to any specific location. And that's why we also looked at some of the other streets within the city of Boulder that have a similar cross section to what we're proposing. So like on Arapahoe, just to see, you know, a feel for how they function right now. And, you know, our understanding is that this should function pretty well based on what we know about those kind of projects. So there is peer information out there as well.
Terrific, thank you. Mike, is your hand up fresh?
Yeah, just to help answer your question, that there is in the book Walkable City Rules, Jeff Speck has a survey of 47 road diets that showed there was actually a net increase in the number of traffic on average over these 4 to 3 conversion process of about 2%, and that the Department of Transportation has a fact sheet that says that road diets making traffic worse is a myth. And so echo what was just said about changing speeds. It's actually helping to solve the problem of cars speeding, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. That's helpful. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have no other questions at the moment. So I think unless I'm not seeing any other hands either. So let's move on to the public hearing. Oh, Trini, yes.
There was some mention about sidewalk improvements.
Yeah.
So on the opposite side of the project, that sidewalk is pretty horrible, and I think there's a great opportunity to improve that. Is there any way that we could move that prior to the beginning of the project somehow to prioritize just kind of like the start of that process, if it's something that's going to take place anyway. And that would be one of like the most concerning ones, in my humble opinion. I mean, it's very narrow. It's not a fun place to walk or be, period, or safe. So it's just a question if there is a way to kind of expedite that process and put that at the top of the list of immediate actions.
Right, Trini, thanks for that question. We definitely heard a lot about sidewalks on both the south and the north side in all of our community engagement. There are so many different variable conditions out there too. It's not the same for the full length of the corridor. So there's a lot going on. To your question about if we could, front load or advance sidewalk improvements before the full corridor project implementation, at this time we don't have funds allocated to that purpose for this project. That would really take funds that have already been allocated for other uses in our budget and have to mean we would not do something else. And that's just the reality of municipal transportation funding. But I think you ask a really good question. I just want to confirm that the sidewalk improvements that Lindsay talked through extensively in our presentation would be included in any future grant funding request as part of the overall project budget.
That's great. That's amazing. Thank you so much,
Valerie. Okay, Mike, you're back again. Last one. We got to go to the public hearing.
Following on that sidewalk issue, yeah, I've talked with one resident who has an issue getting out on the south side, and this is related to my question about the existing lane widths. I'm noting that the travel lanes are now going to be 11 feet where they're currently 10 feet, and just wondering if there might be any way of narrowing them such that the sidewalk area could be expanded a bit to make it more feasible for some residents to get bikes out to an intersection.
Right, I could start to answer that question, and other team members feel free to jump in too. I think one of the goals of the project in terms of both alternatives A and B is really to keep the curb alignment as it exists today pretty much in place. That allows us to avoid a lot of costly, engineering, floodplain analysis, and all sorts of other activities, and allow us to deliver the project in a more quick, cost-efficient way. And so, I think what you're proposing might result in us needing to do that level of intervention on the corridor that really isn't part of the overall strategy and rationale for alternatives A and B. And I do hear you though that maybe there are places where we can put a lot of emphasis where there are pretty skinny widths out there on the sidewalk. That's certainly something that we can look into in final design. Again, as we mentioned earlier, the conditions out there are just so variable. So every inch of the project area will just need a closer look in final design to see what the possibilities are. Lindsay or Garrett, is there anything you'd like to add to Mike's question about whether or not reducing travel lane widths would afford us any opportunity for an enhanced sidewalk realm condition?
Yeah, I think you covered it, Valerie. Just reinforcing that in order to keep the project costs as low as possible, that moving the curbs would be cost prohibitive for being able to move forward with the recommended alternative. And so that is a key factor in the considerations.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're really moving to the public hearing. Veronica, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
To remind everyone, you can use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen to be called on, as well as I do recommend people using their first and last name to be called. So I'm going to start with Chuck. Could you confirm you're able to speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great.
Well,
My name, do I have 2 minutes or 3?
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Chuck Brock. I live at 717 Evergreen Avenue. That's in the Newlands neighborhood. And we moved there several years ago, my wife and I, because we wanted to split our commutes evenly by bike. I work at NOAA on South Broadway, and she works at INCAR's Foothills campus, which is at 47th and Foothills Parkway and the diagonal right where the train tracks cross. So my commute's pretty easy. I can hop on my bike. I bike probably 90% of the time, even in winter. When it's really bad, I'll take the bus. My wife doesn't have a bus line to get her to her work, and her bike route is much less direct than mine. I get on the Broadway bike path and I zoom right to work. She, on the other hand, either has to take Iris, which is very fraught right now, the way it's currently designed, or she can wind her way through the neighborhood streets. And let me describe to you the route that she has to take to do that. So she would have to go down Evergreen, bike down the sidewalk on Broadway to the crosswalk in front of the North Boulder Rec Center, press the button, wait, cross, go through the parking lot, go behind the North Boulder Rec Center, past the community gardens, get onto Forest Street, go a block, turn left on 19th, go half a block, get onto Glenwood, and then bike to Folsom. Then at that point, she has to go right a half a block, and it's a very tricky crossing because it's very heavily trafficked, and she needs to turn left onto Glenwood and go past Safeway. Goes across 28th, gets all the way to 30th, then she has to turn north and go half a block, get onto O'Neill Court, go to a little private street that is blocked with a barricade, or she has to work her way around it. It's completely blocked in winter. Then she has to go through the park, Howard Houston Park, around the edge. And then finally she gets to work as compared to my commute route, which is very direct. So the current streets, I've heard many people suggest that we don't need any improvements to Iris. Biking's just fine. It's not. These are not direct. They are not efficient, and they're not easy to use. So we're really looking forward to having the new design at Iris, and we will use it all the time. It'll be much more direct, safe, and efficient for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Let's see. The next person we have is Martha. Would you be able to confirm you're able to speak?
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Martha Ruskowski. I live at 18 South 31st Street in Martin Acres. I want to thank staff and TAB for the really thoughtful, thorough work on this project. I encourage you to support Alternative B. I've been listening carefully through this whole process, and I've heard a lot of concerns from my friends and neighbors who live up in the Iris neighborhoods. And I want to say, I hear you. I understand why you're concerned about this project. I know that you're worried about traffic flow on Iris. I know you're worried about cut-through traffic in the neighborhood. I know you're worried that you won't be able to turn left onto or off of Iris. I've lived in Boulder on and off since 1977. So like you, I've seen a lot of change in this community. It's not always easy. It's not always comfortable. But I think a lot of the change is for the better here. I've also worked in transportation since 1994. So makes me kind of old at this point. I started out working in Boulder, but now I work nationally. I do work with the U.S. Department of Transportation and others. I'm just speaking as a citizen though. And I have seen hundreds of projects like this get proposed and implemented in communities across the country. And here's what I want to say to my friends and neighbors. I hear your concerns, but I want to tell you it will be okay. It really will. Like going to 3 lanes will be okay. Traffic flow will actually be more consistent. Turning left on and off of Iris will be easier. And cut through traffic, being on Iris is still going to be way more efficient than speeding past your houses in your neighborhood. So you don't know me. I might know some of you, but you don't know me. But I just want to say, from a national perspective, having seen so many of these projects, from the professionals in this room and the modeling, from the professionals at FHWA and transportation departments across the country, these projects really do work. So I encourage you to, give this process a chance and trust it and see what happens. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Gary, would you be able to confirm you're able to speak?
Yes, here I am. Can you hear?
Yes, perfect. All right.
I'm Gary Sprung. I live at 3675 Aspen Court, not far from 16th Avenue, and I very often ride my bike or use a car and have to cross or use Iris Avenue. I live very close to it. When I ride my bike south to downtown or to East Boulder, I have to deal with Iris Avenue, and I feel like I put my life in jeopardy very often as I cross Iris Avenue on a bicycle. And I worry about making a simple mistake that could actually cost me my life because of the unsafe configuration of Iris. And I think that reducing travel lanes from 4 to 2 will greatly increase the safety of crossing Iris. But the place where this project will perhaps most affect me on a day-to-day basis is when I drive. I very often have to go south on 16th to Iris Avenue and then turn left to go east on Iris Avenue. And it is often very difficult to make that left turn because I'm dealing with 4 travel lanes and 2 in opposite directions, and waiting for the right hole in the traffic so that I can make that left turn is difficult often. With this project, there'll be a center turning lane. So my turn from southbound 16th to eastbound Iris, I'll be able to turn into that into the center lane before I enter a traffic lane. So I only will have to deal with 1 travel lane to cross on my car. Then I'll be able to pause and look for traffic on eastbound traffic to the right of me and then get into the travel lane at a safe time. So I think that turn is going to really be improved, and I look forward to that. My neighborhood, many people are concerned about cut through traffic. I'm not so concerned about it because I don't see that this project will cause much delay in our travel. But we don't need to really debate that. It's clear that the streets of my neighborhood need traffic calming anyway. You look at the information you published, 29 miles per hour is the normal speed on Kalmia. Well, that needs traffic calming. So I'm glad you're including traffic calming as part of the project. And I think when you look for grant money, you should specify that that's included. Finally, on the general topic of—
Thanks, Gary.
Let's see, Alexi Davis, are you able to speak?
You're muted, Alexi.
How about now?
Oh, perfect. There we
Sorry
go.
about that. Alexi Davies. First, I want to thank staff for all the work on this project for this past 1 year. It's been great. I guess my only message is let's not delay the IRIS recommendation and keep the momentum going to get a complete, safe, and direct network for cyclists to get to their destinations. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. Sue Prant, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Oops.
You're muted again, Sue.
Okay, how about now?
Good.
Better.
Great.
Yes.
As I was saying, I'm Sue Pran, the Executive Director of Community Cycles. I just really want to thank staff and CAD for your leadership and your many, many hours on this project and your undying commitment to it. And also thank the members of our advocacy committee who worked very hard on advancing this project and communicating to the public the things they need to know to help reach an understanding. As Martha said, you know, we're not totally there yet, but I do believe that we will get there. And the proof will be when we have the project before us. And as Martha said, many of these projects do very well, and I'm totally confident ours will do as well as also. As the letter I sent you this afternoon, we're really committed to helping work on the design with you. This is not the end of this project, but the beginning to us, and a long beginning, but a beginning. And we look forward to working with you on that to make this northbound cycle track as safe as possible, to get all the neighbors on board to love and embrace it, and which I think will happen. And many members of the city, and make the city a better place. We're also committed to helping you find funding for this quickly so we can move ahead on this, because I do think that's very important with the current commitment we have with TAB's leadership and the current staff we have, and council leadership as well, that letting this project stall could prove the death of it. So we're very committed to helping you find funding in all the ways in which we can help. And so I think that's about it. And thank you very much for your leadership on this and all your hard work.
Thank you, Sue. We have 2 more hands up. Pete, will you be able to unmute yourself and confirm you're able to speak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. So my name's Pete Carney. And first off, I just want to say the presentation, I really appreciated it, the visuals and the examples given. Normally I might have suggested option A, but there were some points about B I hadn't considered. Either way, I think it's most important that A or B is done. And that's because changing the car traffic from 4 to 2, I think is important. And I actually have an example from yesterday that just happened, to sort of illustrate that. I drive, but I also try to bike as much as I can, especially for errands close by. And on 2 different occasions, I was almost hit by a car. In both cases, I had the right of way, and the only reason I wasn't hit was because I was just being extra careful and not trusting that they were paying attention. And the more pertinent example was I was coming from the Safeway at 28th and Iris, crossing 28th where there's that lit crosswalk. So I hit the button to light it up, and there were a bunch of cars in the right lane. They all stopped, but I couldn't see any in the left. So I went really slow, and there ended up being a car that was also probably speeding, but just blew it completely. And if I had been going straight ahead, I would have definitely been hit. And I think this is something that I believe Mike brought up that kind of goes to his point that we need to build our streets to make sure those things can't happen. And when you have 2 lanes, when that car couldn't see me coming, he also should have seen the light, obviously, but it was during the day. Maybe he didn't see it lit up. We need to make more changes so that cars will naturally go slower. They won't be able to have a blind spot and maybe hit a pedestrian or a cyclist. And also to the point that others have made, I really don't think it's going to be a big problem with making traffic that much worse. And even if it does extend by 30 seconds or a minute, I think saving lives is more important. So yeah, that's kind of how I fall on that. I also think in the long run, all studies show from where this has been done across the US and the world, eventually, maybe not right away, but there will be more people using the bike lanes and most likely less cars on that street in general. So traffic could even get better eventually. But yeah, great work, and I support the changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We actually have 2 more hands up. Natalie Orphan, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm Natalie Orphan, and I'm one of the people who lives directly on Iris Avenue. And I have 4 kids who are traveling in different directions to get to their schools. at like Foothill, one's at High Peak, so they're going a different direction. And one's in middle school. And I'm so excited that we're doing the road diet, but I was really hoping for option A because I see a lot of safety detriments with option B, mainly that cars barely see pedestrians coming both directions. It's happened to me just this week, trying to cross in the opposite direction of traffic. And bikes are going to be going a lot faster since it's a downhill in the opposite direction. And then there's e-bikes and e-scooters to consider, which are going very fast. So I worry about their conflict points and that they might not be seen. And I'm worried about me when I'm one of these people doing that. But in regard to other stuff, not just the safety concerns, I live on the south side, so I will be losing easy access to this bike lane. Like right now, we leave our house and we can get on a bike lane, but the sidewalks are not very appropriate to handle bike traffic right now. And that's what I'm gonna have to use. And especially in the winter when the sidewalks are not even navigable as a pedestrian. So without some guaranteed minimum width, I'm really concerned that we will lose access. It won't be safe for us to get to the bike lane. And I think that will affect how often I choose to bike and walk. And so I'm really hoping you guys can stress the importance of that sidewalk should be a multi-use sidewalk width because it's going to be used as a multi-use sidewalk, and that the city should take on snow clearing because it is not cleared to a sufficient level as is. So I know that wasn't really part of the conversation, but I think it really should be considered because residents historically have not taken good care, and it's with good reason because it's a long stretch of sidewalk, it's the back of their house, and the snow plows are making it like solid ice that can't be removed. So I really hope that you can make it a way for people like me to still access this two-way bike lane. Even though it's not my favorite, I still want to be able to bike if I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Moselle, are you able to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, good. I'm Moselle Sutton. I live in North Boulder on Kalmia. So I'm very aware of Iris and the cut-through traffic. I've gone to about all of the community meetings since last year. I was very interested to give my opinions and talk to the staff. And then the more I learned, the more discouraged I got because I found out that the transportation department was putting in protected bike lanes no matter what because it was mandated by council. I agree that Iris needs fixing. I agree we need sidewalks fixed. I agree that we need speeds reduced, and the majority of the crashes are at intersections. But we have, I would hope, a very good staff on transportation that could think of another way to fix Iris besides putting protected bike lanes and narrowing it from 4 to 2 lanes with the center lane. I don't know if you've taken into account all the commuter traffic, the increase in traffic with all the new building that's already going on and what's to come. And I am extremely concerned about cut-through traffic because I see it. Every time a lane is closed to fix on Iris, I get traffic flying down Kalmia. I live right on the curb and it's rather scary. So I just have to say, I'm a little discouraged that I understand that, you know, bikers need to bike, but we've got tons of routes out there and I don't see where a major 5 million or more project should be geared toward bikes when there's a lot of other people that are out there with concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Tila, it might be our last hand up, so we might be through.
Okay. I'm going to give people another few seconds to raise their hand if they want to join in. I, at this point, also want to acknowledge not only is there a lot of outreach in the memo and in the presentation we just heard, there was 900 pages of survey responses that got sent out to TAB in, was it July or April? I don't know. It's been a long haul. We also, of course, as members of TAB, have received multiple emails this week, last couple of weeks. You know, there's been a trickle through time, but we've received a lot of information, opinions, and feedback from the members of the general public. And I just wanted to assure them, even if you didn't speak tonight, we did receive those. We've read them. We've considered them, and certainly staff has considered them. I think some of the presentation tonight and the thoroughness of the SEEP is reflecting some of that feedback and staff responses. So seeing no further hands, is that right, Veronica? We will now close the public hearing on this item and turn it over to TAB for discussion. Just to be clear, the request of TAB this evening is for a recommendation to City Council. It's kind of on the SEEP, and that's not really quite clear what that means. In the past, it basically means, yes, we agree with the analysis and the conclusions that staff has reached. They did the SEEP correctly. As you heard, there's a mandated for any of these projects that require a community environmental assessment process. There's a checklist that's there, and staff, you know, according to the presentation in the memo, included a much more robust set of questions in addition to the SEEP process. So this is sort of SEEP plus. And so as our job, it's one of the few things that's actually called out in our charter, the city organizing documents for TAB. Our job is to assess the SEEP and make a recommendation to City Council on one of these projects. And so that's sort of where I would like to tailor our discussion this evening. So that being said, I don't want to introduce motion language yet, but we're working toward a motion. Will we be endorsing the SEEP and asking City Council to instruct staff to carry on and proceed to final design on option B, or no? So that's where we're at.
Are we taking a vote?
Yeah, Trini, I haven't made a motion yet. I see you're unmuted. I don't know how much discussion we need on this.
Yeah,
but I would open it up at this time for TAB discussion.
I'm just really, really grateful for everybody's work. I know that it's been said over and over and over and over, but I don't think we can say it enough.
I agree.
And I'm all for it. Option B.
Okay. I think the outreach was overkill, and I've said that before, but I am also firmly in favor of the SEEP process and the conclusions. I think they've definitely shown how the sausage is made and have done their homework, and I am not going to second guess them. I will be voting to endorse this. Darcy, you had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, likewise. I just wanted to say, as someone who studies public processes and community engagement, this is exemplary. I mean, they have done so much work. I mean, Erica Amador alone, you know, with her team has done so much outreach and so many types of outreach. Mm-hmm. It's a really impressive process. And I think it's resulted in an enormous amount of information that the staff have skillfully kind of massaged into a really thorough report. And I have to say, I really appreciated those animations that Lindsay showed about how people would actually use the bikeway. That was, you know, it's really helpful because part of this process is envisioning, what does this really mean? What is it? How is it going to feel? What is it going to look like? And how are people actually going to benefit from it and use it? And so I commend the staff on, you know, thinking of doing those animations and describing that process and how people will access the bike lanes. The two-way cycle track, but just in general, I just want to commend the city. I don't have questions because all of my questions were answered and in our discussion, and I just yeah, I think it's a really exemplary process, and I think and I also appreciated how, you know, there are exemplars for this kind of project in the city already. And that's really helpful to remind ourselves and everyone of that this is not the first of its kind. that there are other projects out there that are like this, and that, you know, there are streets like this in Boulder. So, yeah, thank you very much to everyone who participated in putting all this together.
Yeah, great presentation tonight. Mike.
Yeah, I just want to also lend my support and respond to some of the concerns people raised, including the last person to talk. And first say, this is not about solely bicycles. This is also about safety for people who are driving. 4-lane roads are both inefficient and dangerous. And it's natural to think that reducing 4 lanes to 3 is going to clog things up, but in fact, studies show that doesn't happen. And adding a central turn lane to 2 lanes of traffic actually doubles the capacity of a road. 4-lane roads are dangerous because the turning lane is the passing lane, and they're inefficient because the passing lane is the turning lane. And somebody who's trying to make a left turn has to negotiate 2 lanes of oncoming traffic, and they can get T-boned by somebody who can't see them because of traffic going in the same direction. So this is clearly not just about bicycles. This is about safety for all road users. And I very much support this alternative B.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I've been trying to, in my speaking with members of the public, trying to get them to understand that, yeah, this is not a bike-centric project. It is a project trying to tame conditions on Iris Avenue that are both dominated by speeding motor vehicles and not serving our neighborhoods. It's a functional highway through this neighborhood, as evidenced by people who have to build very tall fences because they don't like the noise, they don't like, you know, the road traffic, and then it makes them feel like that sidewalk behind there isn't their problem. And this is all part and parcel of Iris misbehaving as a street and as something we want to see in our city. So we're using the protected bike lanes as a tool to sort of improve conditions for the people who are sort of left with the crumbs, and to tame out of control motor vehicle traffic. And we expect that this will actually make life better for everybody. We also are under, you know, the direction of council in 2022. They reaffirmed their commitment, current council reaffirmed their commitment in 2024 to the core arterial network. And if we're going to call this a priority corridor, we have to treat it like a priority corridor. And that means prioritizing what we can do in the relatively attainable near term to fix the problems. I don't think anyone who uses Iris today would want to, you know, live right there because they like this, you know, quasi highway going through. So if we were actually talking about enlarging it to become what it is now, we would have, I would hope, a lot of community opposition to that. I understand that change is hard, and I've been doing work like this for 17, 18 years. But the very first thing that I cut my teeth on as an advocate for better infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists and for drivers was a protected bike lane in New York City on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And it was unthinkable that we could reallocate road space. Carmageddon was certain to happen. I asked for 10 lanes. Had a nice big team behind me, had 500 letters written by people on the street in support of this that I got in 4 days. It was a difficult thing, and I convinced the city to do 1 mile. Then I had a baby, I left to come here, meddle around here, but they have built that 10th mile. They built it a couple of years ago because the first mile was successful, and so was the second one, and so was the third, and so was the 5th. We've seen it happen. And I am not suggesting we're New York City, but I am suggesting we're Boulder. We have a commitment to allowing safe travel and connected neighborhoods anywhere that we can. And this is a project that is long overdue, and cannot emphasize Sue's urgency enough. Let's get it rolling as quickly as we can. But that is partly why I've been so frustrated with how extensive this outreach has been. But you do. I think we've learned lessons every time as a city and the community that we do a project like this. And I'm hoping that the lesson that we learn here is we can do this. And maybe we can do it faster next time. So I really, really commend the work of current staff, past staff. This has been happening, past tabs. But excellent, excellent work. As I said, you've done your homework. Now let's take the test. I would like to move to support the staff recommendation identified through the SEEP for the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvement Project and recommend that the project proceed to final design. Do I hear a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Trini. Any discussion on the motion? Lovely, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
4 ayes, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
May I make a friendly suggestion just to
You're a little late. Would you like another motion?
That the language includes, you know, what we had on the last slide about the SEEP evaluation, in addition to the recommended alternative.
So I said motion to support the staff recommendation identified through the SEEP. Was that not?
Right, and I think also just include a phrase about the SEEP evaluation itself, which includes, you know, the evaluation of all 4 alternatives. Just to make sure that we have the appropriate language to move this forward.
We've approved the SEEP, no? Oh, I see. So you think we didn't approve the SEEP? We think we just approved the staff identification, the recommendation identified through the SEEP?
Right, right.
I think that's approving the SEEP. She's
Let's
worried.
say it all.
Okay, all right. But we already voted. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
scratch
going,
that.
yeah, so apparently I would like to withdraw my motion. So this is, by the way, where they often have suggested motion language in the memo. So I actually was looking at the thing and writing this down while it was up on the screen. Because that's not even the language that you would want. Okay.
This is a test, Tila.
Yes, I know, right? You want us to endorse the SEEP? What do you want us to do? Approve the SEEP?
The evaluation.
The noun is not there.
So the tab recommend to City Council that they accept the findings of the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvement Project SEEP. And if you'd like to also add language about the recommended alternative, that doesn't hurt as well.
No, mostly I wanted to make sure we included recommending the project proceed to final design. I'm not too worried about the SEEP or the. whatever.
Right. Yeah. And if you'd like to include that as well for clarity, that is also good. I just want to make sure procedurally we have your recommendation that you recommend the findings of the SEEP evaluation as well as the additional items.
Okay. I move that TAB recommends the findings of the SEEP for the Iris Avenue Transportation Improvements Project and recommend that the project proceed to final design.
Second.
Ooh, Mike comes in with the second. Any discussion on this very, very different motion? Excellent. We'll take it to a vote. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you for humoring the additions and revisions there. Appreciate it.
That's okay. Okay, on we go then. We are 1 minute early for matters from staff.
Wow. All right. So with matters from staff tonight, we have several presentations because we just couldn't help ourselves, even though it's this big night tonight. So thank you for your extra attention as we go into a few things. I think all of these presentations will be pretty brief, and they're all things we're really excited to bring to you just for your awareness and understanding, and also feedback if applicable. So we'll go ahead and get into it. The first item is going to be presented by Devin Joslin on our Vision Zero action plan action item, which is to update our signal practices. So I'll hand it over to Devin. Thanks.
Thank you, Valerie. Let me get my presentation going. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Devin Joslin, the city's principal traffic engineer. And I'm here tonight to present to you the signal timing practices and how they are planned to be updated in accordance with the actions identified in the Vision Zero action plan. The presentation will detail the topic areas to be updated and address what the scope of work to complete the update is envisioned to include. The practices are a technical document used internally by city staff to guide decisions related to the planning, design, construction, operations, and maintenance of the traffic signal system. As such, it is anticipated that city staff and a consultant will collaborate to complete the updates. A stakeholder group is not planned to be formed, but TAB and council will receive periodic updates as work progresses. I'll first go over the signal timing practices to give you an overview of when they were developed, what is included in them, and how transportation operations staff has been using the practices in conjunction with prior Safe Streets Boulder reports to guide our work. I'll provide a deeper dive into the current practices related to signal operations and how the scope of the update to the practices is tied to the crashes most frequently occurring at signals. I'll highlight how the strategic and prioritized implementation of the current practices has been very effective at reducing crashes. I'll also provide some context about the state of the existing signal system and roadway infrastructure and some of the challenges and considerations related to implementing changes, particularly left turn phasing changes. Finally, I'll review the items that transportation operations staff has been considering relative to the scope of work for the signal practices update, and I'll provide the key takeaways and next steps. Some of the next steps include having a discussion like this with council on October 17th. I would encourage all of you to attend or listen to the recording of the discussion once it's available. So in 2018, a signal practices document was developed based on review of national standards, peer agency and industry research, as well as documentation of prior city practices related to the planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operations of the traffic signal system. The signal practices are a technical document that city staff use to efficiently and consistently make decisions based on established engineering principles. The intent of the action items in the Vision Zero action plan related to the signal practices update is to complete an update to the operations section. This section is what details how the city determines such things as left turn phasing, right turn on red restrictions, and leading pedestrian intervals. I'll note that the action plan specifies that once the practices are updated, any changes recommended as a result should first be implemented across the high-risk network, then other signals. The action plan also acknowledges that the city will likely need to pursue and secure grant funding to fully fund signal enhancements. The operations section of the signal practices covers many topics from standard timing settings, such as for yellow clearance and all red times, emergency preemption operations, and corridor coordination. The main topics intended to be updated are in bold on the slide and include things like left turn phasing, right turn on red, and leading pedestrian intervals, as well as considerations for installation of accessible push buttons in accordance with ProWAG and the ADA transition plan. The 3 topics in bold that we intend to focus the update on are what mostly correspond to the crash types that occur at signals, as I'll show later in the presentation. As already mentioned, these are also the topic areas corresponding to the Vision Zero Action Plan actions. I'll now speak more in depth about each of the 3 topic areas on which the update to the practices is planned to focus. Signalized left turn movements can be operated in 3 primary ways. The options for left turn phasing typically involve trade-offs between safety and efficiency. Left turn phasing types include permitted only, protected only, and protected permitted. Some advantages and disadvantages of each phasing type are as follows. Some advantages of permitted only phasing are that it can allow for shorter cycle lengths, which can lead to reduced pedestrian delays and longer pedestrian crossing times, as well as fewer change intervals each cycle. Some disadvantages of permitted only phasing is that it has a higher number of potential conflicts with other vehicular, pedestrian, and bicyclist movements, and that left turn demand may not be adequately served each cycle, potentially resulting in delays and queues. Some advantages of protected only left turn phasing are that it minimizes potential conflicts with other movements, and that it is a proven safety countermeasure where crash patterns are present, where inadequate gaps are concentrated during certain times of day, where visibility across an intersection is limited, or in areas with a high volume of left turns and multimodal activity. Some disadvantages are that it may require longer cycle lengths to operate, and it may increase overall delay for pedestrian and left turn movements, since each movement is served separately during a portion of the signal cycle. This also results in more change intervals each cycle, as each separate phase requires its own yellow and red clearance interval. More change intervals may result in a higher potential for red light running. Protected permitted left turn operation allows for both protected and permitted phasing of the signal cycle to balance these trade-offs where conditions allow. The evaluation criteria that city staff carefully considers to determine the type of left turn phase operation are designed to balance the safety and efficiency of the system. The criteria consider a variety of conditions encountered at an intersection approach throughout the day. Evaluations are done for each approach of a signalized intersection and for each of the times of day during which a signal timing plan is in operation. The city typically operates 5 timing plans per day: AM, midday, and PM peak hour plans, as well as a PM off-peak plan and a free/overnight plan. The evaluation criteria included in the current practice include such things as lane geometry, sight distance, volume of left turning and oncoming or opposing through traffic, volume of conflicting bicyclists and pedestrians, the speed of oncoming traffic, crash history, and operational analysis that considers queue lengths and the number of signal cycles it takes for a vehicle to turn left, and current type of left turn phasing. To date, the current practice seeks to provide the least restrictive form of left turn control that provides an appropriate balance between the crash history, potential for conflict, and mobility of all road users. Right turn on red restrictions may be put in place to reduce conflict between movements and modes of traffic where certain conditions exist. Factors evaluated when considering right turn on red restrictions include sight distance, multimodal volumes, including consideration of high volume multi-use paths, signal phasing, crash history, and intersection geometry. I'll note that a right turn on red restriction generally reduces conflict between pedestrians and turning traffic at the crosswalk that is perpendicular to the right turn movement. However, it should also be considered that a right turn on red restriction shifts the conflict point to the parallel crosswalk to the driver's right as they turn, and this is referred to as right turn on green conflicts. For this reason, evaluation of any potential right turn on red restriction should include an assessment of relative pedestrian and bicyclist volumes and exposure at both potential conflict points. Experience with right turn on red restrictions in the city of Boulder has shown that driver compliance with these restrictions can be a concern. Resources to enforce these restrictions are limited. Given the compliance concerns, use of right turn on red restrictions should be selective so that respect for these restrictions is not eroded for locations where right turn on red restriction use is highly justified. The city has implemented right turn on red restrictions in a variety of ways that include static signs, red arrows, and blank out signs. The practice related to leading pedestrian intervals includes the review of 3 types of evaluation criteria: responsive, proactive, and opportunistic. The responsive criteria focus on a review of crash history at an intersection that would be correctable through the implementation of an LPI, such as the right turn on green conflict mentioned previously. The proactive criteria consider the pedestrian and right turn volumes and is based on reducing risk as a function of the potential for conflicts to occur. The opportunistic criteria considers whether an LPI can be implemented proactively with minimal impact to signal operations and coordination along a corridor. The majority of LPIs implemented in the city have been due to satisfaction of either the proactive or opportunistic criteria. Very few have been implemented in response to a correctable crash pattern. Some fun facts about LPI are that they date back to 1995 in the city and that staff have implemented LPIs at a total of 103 intersection approaches. I'll now shift to talk about the Vision Zero context. That's the basis for the practice update. The signal timing practices update is focused on addressing a subset of severe crashes that occur at signalized intersections. Review of the most recent 4 years of severe crash data indicates that just over 1/3 of all severe crashes occur at signalized intersections. This equates to about 18 severe crashes per year at signals and 30 severe crashes per year occurring at other locations. There are 9 crash types occurring at signals that have led to severe crashes. Based on a review of 2020 through 2023 crash data, an average of just over 8 severe crashes per year are attributed to making left turns at signalized intersections, making it the most common crash type at signals. An average of 5 severe crashes per year are attributed to red light running, making it the second most common crash type occurring at signals. The remaining 7 crash types at signalized intersections result in approximately 5 severe crashes per year, or 25% of all severe crashes at signals. You'll note that crashes involving right turn movements, such as at right turn bypass lanes, right turn on red, and right hook, collectively result in less than 2 severe crashes per year on average. Common crashes of approach turn crashes or left turn crashes at signals include an inability to see oncoming traffic, assuming oncoming traffic will stop when the phase changes, misinterpreting the traffic signal indication or phasing, choosing an inadequate gap, and failure to see bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists. Taking a look again at the overall citywide annual severe crash picture, left turn related crashes make up about 17% of all annual severe crashes. The update to the practices is focused on driving down that number, but you can see that even eliminating all left turn severe crashes would leave a significant amount of work to be done to reach zero. That is why the Transportation and Mobility Department and the transportation operations team must take a multifaceted engineering and systems-based approach to getting to zero, and why no one single action will get us there. Good crash data is critical to fully understand the causes, possible countermeasures, and possible impacts of changes related not just to left turn crashes, but all severe crashes. Since 2018, transportation operations staff has been strategically implementing the signal practices to address the most problematic locations and also proactively make changes where conditions met criteria to do so. Many of the locations where changes have been made were identified through prior crash data analysis done for Safe Streets Boulder reports. Flashing yellow arrow signal heads have been installed at 149 intersection approaches. Left turn phasing changes have been made at 54 approaches. Leading pedestrian intervals have been installed at 77 approaches, and right turn on red restrictions have been installed at 7 approaches. Flashing yellow arrow signal heads are not new to the city. They were first installed 20 years ago at the intersection of Table Mesa Drive and Tantra Drive, and the transportation operations team has been steadily adding them at every opportunity. The most recent round of phasing changes was implemented earlier this year and included changes to protected only operation by time of day for 6 approaches at 6 intersections. The progress made is significant and has resulted in a 68% reduction in all left turn crashes at signals. That includes property damage only and severe crashes, but it dropped the number of crashes per year from 76 crashes to 25 crashes, again, representing that 68% reduction. And this finding is based on a review of before-after crash data at intersections where left turn phasing changes have been made in accordance with the current practices. The current approach to implementing the practices has served the community well and has been successful. In addition, as a result of the current practices, transportation operations has been able to successfully pursue grants to assist with funding enhancements to the signal system because of the way in which the left turn phasing evaluation process justifies the project against the grant scoring criteria. Based on the tremendous level of implementation success, I would now like to describe the current state of the overall signal system with respect to the type of left turn phasing or roadway geometry. I realize this table has a lot of numbers, but I'll break down what they mean and show how this is relevant to the scope of work for the signal timing practices update and any policy discussions regarding left turn phasing selection. Up at the top, you can see that across the city, there are a total of 146 traffic signals, within the city, there are a total of 146 traffic signals that control vehicular movements, and there are 494 approaches where the signal controls left turn movements. The key takeaway from all of this is that nearly half of the existing signal system does not support quick or easy implementation of left turn phasing changes, be it to protected only all the time or another type of left turn phasing. In order to implement left turn phasing changes at intersections currently operating with permitted only phasing or with shared lanes, signal heads would need to be installed, controllers and conduit may also need to be upgraded, and exclusive turn lanes would need to be constructed where they are not present. This would also, in some cases, mean that the signal pole and mast arm would need to be reconstructed to either be made long enough or strong enough to support the additional signal head needed for left turn phasing. As you can imagine, this work is quite costly and time-consuming to complete, as it would involve modifying 240 intersection approaches if we were to implement protected-only phasing everywhere across the city. As a recent example of the costs to do this type of work, The Safer Signals Grant Project is going to upgrade 14 intersection approaches to add left turn signal heads and phasing at an estimated cost of $725,000. Extrapolating that cost per approach across the 240 approaches equates to a minimum estimate of at least $12.5 million in investment needed to upgrade the signal system to get protected only phasing everywhere. The cost is likely substantially higher, though, as only one of the 14 intersections included in the Safer Signals grant requires a new pole and mast arm. The other thing to consider relative to more broadly and more restrictively controlling left turns is the need for an exclusive left turn lane to be present. While in some cases, a shared lane condition could be alleviated through lane repurposing, in many more cases, it would require the intersection approach to be reconstructed and widened, which, as we know, has its own considerations and drawbacks. The other interesting thing to note is that currently only 7% of signalized intersection approaches across the system operate with protected only left turn phasing at all times. Despite this, there are very few intersections remaining across the system that have a correctable crash pattern, that is 3 or more crashes in 3 years, that would be correctable by a change to protected only phasing. Since I know I've already taken a lot of time, I'll go through these next slides pretty quickly, but I want to have examples of some of the conditions shown in that previous table. So this slide shows an intersection that operates with permitted only left turn phasing. This is the eastbound left turn at Canyon Boulevard and 15th Street. And as you can see, the mast arm does not extend out over the left turn lane, nor would it be strong enough to support additional signal heads. So this is an example where the signal approach would need to be reconstructed in order to change the type of left turn phasing. This is an example where permitted only left turn phasing operates using a flashing yellow arrow. This is the intersection of Arapahoe Avenue and Cherryvale Road, the westbound left turn movement. As you can see in this case, the signal has been upgraded and the mast arm is long enough such that the left turn signal indication is out over the left turn lane. However, the conditions at this intersection, again, when evaluated against the criteria for left turn phasing, indicate that the flashing yellow arrow to display permitted only left turn phasing is appropriate at all times of day. Another type of phasing that I didn't describe in detail, but is one that we plan to explore with this update to the practices, is what's called pedestrian protected left turn phasing. The picture shows the eastbound left turn at 30th Street and Walnut Street, and with pedestrian protected left turn phasing, when a pedestrian pushes the push button to cross the street, the permitted phase will be excluded and only a protected phase will be displayed. So as you can see in the picture, while the walk phase and flashing don't walk phase is indicated, left turn drivers see a red arrow and are not allowed to turn. But it's conditioned upon a pedestrian being present and pushing the push button to cross. Another example that was in the table was an intersection that does not have a conflicting pedestrian phase. An example of this is at Colorado Avenue and Foothills Parkway for the eastbound left turn movement. As you can see here, the crosswalk is on the south leg of the intersection, and the dual left turn lane turns across the north leg of the intersection. So both the left turns and pedestrians are able to go at the same time without conflicting with each other. An example of a shared lane condition is at 30th Street and Glenwood Drive for the northbound left turn movement. There are no left turn lanes on this portion of 30th Street. And similar to as we talked about with Iris Avenue, left turn movements must be made from the through lane. So in order to implement a different type of left turn phasing here, a left turn lane would need to be constructed along 30th Street. Have just a few more slides. The scope of work for the signal practices update will consider the following aspects pertaining to key topic areas of the operations section. It will strive to understand the various levers that can be adjusted and the technical considerations, costs, and impacts of doing so. The scope will explore some new practices, such as related to protected right turn movements. It will take a deeper dive into the evaluation criteria and give particular consideration to the risk and exposure concept. Certain design guides are beginning to review the anticipated number of PED or bike conflicts on a per signal cycle basis. And that might be something that we explore with the evaluation criteria. It'll also take a detailed review of the crash data to understand if current crash thresholds are appropriate. And it will consider the pedestrian and bicyclist experience, especially as in contexts that are planned to be introduced, such as along Iris with a two-way protected bike lane. It'll also give consideration to sight distance under varying conditions and the sight distance at different times of day and times of year, and based on the location of oncoming and opposing traffic. It'll take a look at some of the trade-offs in cycle lanes, queue lanes, signal coordination, changes in travel patterns, and even trade-offs related to safety, such as those additional change intervals that I mentioned. One aspect that I'm excited to dive deeper into is technology, and that'll be how we use the flashing yellow arrow in different ways, such as with the PED protect left turn phasing. There are also ways to leverage detection at the intersection and operate the flashing yellow arrow such that it only displays a flashing yellow arrow when there is an adequate gap in oncoming traffic, as detected by the signal detection equipment. So lots of exciting things to get into with the scope. In terms of the deliverables, they'll look at documentation of the current research and best practices. They'll come up with revised evaluation criteria, revised decision-making flowcharts and matrices, and they'll tabulate the intersection approaches where changes related to left turn phasing, LPIs, and no right turn on red are recommended. We also expect to get development of a prioritization methodology and some cost estimates to better understand implementation schedule as well as unfunded needs. The takeaways are here. Again, good crash data is essential, and we know that engineering solutions are out there that can make the system more foolproof and forgiving. Many of those solutions can be lower cost and achieved leveraging technology or equipment that's already in place at the intersection. Many solutions can be win-win, such as the PED protect phasing that I described. And we expect that continued strategic and targeted focus on left turn crashes will have a significant positive impact on achieving Vision Zero. The next steps are shown here. Again, we have that discussion with Council on October 17th, and then we expect to dive into a consultant selection project, consultant selection and scoping process later this year. We plan to begin work early next year and have some check-ins with both TAB and Council in Q2. We expect to complete the practice update by Q3 next year, and again, begin implementing those kind of low-hanging fruit or programming type changes across the high-risk network by the end of next year. Thank you for your time. I know I took a lot, but I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Devin. Questions, Tab? Okay, Mike, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, thanks very much, Devin. I appreciate that. Left turns on signals are a very risky thing, but you've also covered right turns on red. my understanding is these were first introduced in North America in the 70s as a fuel saving measure, and that Canada and the US are one of the few countries that actually allow this because of the safety concerns for pedestrians. And now a number of American cities are implementing bans of right turns on red. What do you have any thoughts on that, and whether that is advisable or feasible in Boulder?
Yeah, I think again, as we look at the practices and our approach to date, it has been more tempered. And I think it's been more tempered because the crash data doesn't really show that people are getting severely injured as a result of right turn on red crashes. And there are other things to consider within the signal operation. Like I mentioned, if you restrict the right turn on red, they have to turn at some point in the signal cycle, and they would often be released to turn right on green at the same time the parallel crosswalk is starting up. So you kind of, in some cases, can get queues of right turns building up on red that are then eager to go when they get the green, and may, fail to see a ped or bike crossing on the green as they're eager to make their right turn.
So to that point, Devin, do we have a consideration when we're considering a right turn on red to pair it with an LPI?
So that is a consideration, and that is one of the possible mitigations for that. There are also some things out there in terms of technology, or I say technology, but it's really blank out signs that we could look to leverage a little more holistically across the city as well. There are a few examples in Louisville where a blank out sign displays a no right turn sign when the walk phase is on for the parallel crosswalk. And that might be another way to mitigate that right turn on green conflict. I think what we would see, again, is just kind of with all things traffic engineering related, is you want the restriction to really be applicable to the conditions present at the intersection. And if over time, if it was citywide, you have to consider 24/7, 365 someone's experience at that intersection. And I get it from all angles too, right? But from a motorist's perspective, they would be likely to be very tempted to disregard that prohibition if they felt conditions weren't necessitating it. They would simply go on the red.
So, Devin, thank you. So thank you so much, Devin, for this presentation, for all your work. My crash happened as I was turning left, so I really value and really understand the importance of all of this particular work. On that note, you kept talking about data and how crash data is so important to determine, the outcome of these things. And, one common thing that I have found is that there's really not enough data of non-fatal or near miss interactions. Is there any way that we can kind of, I don't know, get information? I mean, how can we prompt that? Because there's clearly a need. There's really nothing anywhere that I have found that's consistent with what's happening. So I don't know, maybe something to have in the back of our heads of how we can maybe do like a pilot program here in Boulder somehow.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I think with respect to the crashes that don't have severe outcomes, because surprisingly, there are a high percentage of left turn crashes that do not result in the severe injuries. And I know that that's a bit counterintuitive because you would expect that they would. But we can certainly take a closer look at all left turn crashes and the contributing causes. And then to your point about near misses, I think that's another area that we can look at technology and advancements in technology to really help us gain better understanding and insights of those interactions at intersections. And there are many companies that would be happy to sell us on their near miss technology. So there might be ways to establish a pilot at intersections that we really thought we wanted to take a deeper dive into the interactions.
Oh, that's great to know. And then finally, I do have one intersection that really has been bothering me, and I expressed it during our CIP tour, which is Regent and Broadway. I just feel that that's just something horrible waiting to happen. And I know it was explained to me, you know, that it's a CDOT road and all of these other, you know, technicalities, but how can we help you expedite that? Because it's just a timing issue at this point. So I think that if there's a way that as TAB or as me, I mean, however it is that I could help support, if there's any way that I can, I would love to do that, because that's an intersection that keeps me awake. I mean, it's really, really troublesome.
Yeah, and that the project that was mentioned on the CIP bike tour, the Safer Signals project, that is coming very soon to make those changes to it'll make changes to the left turn phasing for the movements from Regent onto Broadway. And it will provide those signal heads necessary to implement a different kind of left turn phasing. And that is planned to be implemented by winter, spring 2025. So within the next 6 months, that'll be implemented.
Okay, there's nothing we can do before that.
I think our options are a bit limited, but it is something we could take a closer look at. As students have returned, we can get a fresh look at the intersection.
Thank you so much, Devin. That's all I got.
Okay. So your comment just at the end here, Devin, is as students return, was a great segue, because I'm curious. You did a good job in explaining the limitations on left turn phasing in different parts of the city. I am curious, with our existing technology and capabilities, do we have the flexibility pretty much anywhere to adjust how signal operations happen through time of day? And the second question is, do we ever adjust it by time of year?
So we definitely have the ability to adjust operations by time of day, and that is how our current practice is structured.
Okay.
So there are some cases where, again, you may encounter in the morning, you might only see like a protected left turn, but maybe during the midday, it gives you that protected and permitted display. And that is all set up in our controller programming for each of the timing plans that operates throughout the day. With respect to a seasonal shift, that could be accomplished, but it would be a little bit bigger undertaking. You would have to modify one of the timing plans and set the logic so that it operates during a certain, the season that you want.
Right.
You would be a little bit limited though. You wouldn't necessarily be able to easily make changes to the overall cycle length, because it's the cycle length that kind of drives your coordination along a corridor. So if you began inserting, many new phases that needed time, that would be a consideration to consider.
Okay. Would the current scope that you're describing of the work include, I'm kind of interested in the seasonal thing, partly because we see when there's daylight saving shift, suddenly the evening commute hour is darker. And people are doing their usual thing at their usual times, but pedestrians and cyclists are suddenly much less visible, say. And so I'm also curious, there are a couple of new no right on red regulations around the university on Broadway, on the streets that approach Broadway. And it makes a lot of sense, particularly when school is in session, but much less sense in the middle of the night in August.
or July when they're not there. And so that's the kind of seasonality that I'm interested, both sort of time and daylight and visibility of vulnerable users on the road, and then sort of presence and absence in large chunks of pedestrians that we've done a good job of protecting when they're there, but when they're not there, I do understand your concern about driver compliance. Does the current scope of work, would it encompass this kind of thinking?
I think to a certain extent, and I'll share just a few more insights about the right turn on red. So the way that those most recent right turn on red restrictions were implemented was using a signal indication that can display both a red arrow and a solid red arrow indication depending on time of day. So if you were to go out to Broadway and University, for example, I don't know exactly when the free or overnight plan starts. I think it's about 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. But that red arrow at the top, the controller set so it would display a solid red indication overnight.
Okay.
And the way it's signed, it says no right turn on red arrow.
Right.
So someone would be permitted in those hours when it's displaying the solid red indication to make the right turn on red.
Okay.
So that is one way to get a kind of conditional or time of day restriction in place. There are some other technical limitations to consider that, it's not a guarantee you can do that everywhere, but it can be done.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, Tab? Okay, thank you. Let's move along. Thanks, Devin.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is an update on our e-bike incentive application cycle. And I just wanted to highlight before I hand it over to our presenter tonight, that this is just a great example of interdepartmental collaboration, as well as a very equity-focused approach to our work. So with that, I'd like to invite Annie Scott from our finance department to give a presentation.
Thanks, Valerie. I'm going to share my screen. Right. Perfect. So as Valerie mentioned, my name is Annie Scott, and I work in the city's finance department on the grants team as the grants program administrator. And this evening, I will be providing just a short overview of an update on current activities related to the 2024 e-bike incentive program. And the program is currently administered through a partnership between transportation and mobility climate initiatives and finance, with finance just taking the lead on program management this year. All right, so this program is funded through the climate tax, which is ballot measure 2A. This was passed in 2022. The tax supports city level climate resilience efforts that center equity and work towards systems change in and beyond Boulder. Vouchers provided through the e-bike incentives program are available to the City of Boulder residents and provide discounts on e-bikes purchased at participating retailers. The city piloted the e-bike incentive program in 2023 and released vouchers during 2 rounds, one in July and one in September. Vouchers were available to those in all income bands, with greater discounts provided to those who income qualified. Aptim, an environmental consulting firm that is under contract with the city, provides administrative support for the program in the areas of registration, application, and random selection process and management, and also engages in outreach, technical assistance, and evaluation activities. Community Cycles contracts with the city to offer important program-specific services, such as consultation with local bike shops, community outreach, advising on e-bike purchases, and the provision of classes. All right, so I will share just a little bit about e-bikes. As I'm sure most of you are familiar, an e-bike is an electric motorized bicycle that's pedal assisted, creating a more accessible way to cycle through tougher terrain and travel further distances. Other benefits of e-bikes include reducing emissions and increasing personal savings when replacing car trips with e-bike trips. And it also has health benefits from pedaling a bicycle, and also kind of can turn car trips into enjoyable bike rides. There are two main types of e-bikes that will be eligible for the incentive and also were last year, a standard or general e-bike and a cargo e-bike. General e-bikes are great for commuting to work or school, while cargo e-bikes offer a larger variety of uses, such as transporting kids, pets, groceries, etc. Adaptive e-bikes will also be available on an as-needed basis. All right, so I'd love to just share some highlights from the program this year. We did make several significant updates to the program just based on lessons learned from the 2023 pilot offering last year. So eligibility for vouchers will now be centered on those who have a household income at or below 80% of the area median income. Data collected from the 2023 pilot indicated that there were higher voucher redemption rates for those who income qualified into the program overall, which demonstrated a greater demand and need for the incentives in the income qualified demographic. Additionally, there is assistance available to those who do not fall in the eligible income band through the state's e-bike tax credit program, which also provides a point of sale discount for bikes for up to $450 for any Colorado resident. Additionally, voucher amounts have shifted. They have actually increased to make a higher quality e-bike accessible to those with greater financial need. Feedback from participating bike shops indicated that providing a higher voucher amount to income qualified residents would enable the purchase of a quality bike that meets a voucher recipient's individual needs and can be a reliable long-term form of transportation. Additionally, feedback indicated that some income qualified participants did not redeem their vouchers last year once the true cost of an e-bike and accessories became apparent after selecting a shop and a desired bike model. And finally, the city has made the decision to disallow voucher stacking using both the state tax credit discount as well as the city voucher for the purchase of a single bike. I will add in that an additional state program opened last week, which was another rebate program. And so we have also chosen to disallow stacking with that program. The reasons for this decision include the desire to expand the reach of the voucher opportunities statewide, the city's increased voucher amounts that more easily make a bike purchase doable for a resident without the state voucher, and also the fact that not all bike shops in Boulder County are participating in the state program, potentially lowering city voucher utilizations at these shops. All right, so you will see here the voucher details for this year. And so they are split into 4 categories. We have 2 income qualified categories for those with incomes above 60% AMI to 80% AMI, and then 2 categories for those at or below 60% AMI. And you'll see that there are standard and e-cargo or adaptive amounts for each of those categories. So we have a $1,600 voucher, a $2,100 voucher, and then another $2,100 and a $2,700 voucher. So you will see that these amounts are higher than the previous year, as I mentioned, just to allow for ease of purchase for those who have greater a level of financial need. Additionally, all voucher recipients will have the option to receive a $200 starter kit. This allows them to purchase safety equipment such as helmets, child seats, and high quality locks. All right, and then I'm just going to share a little bit about the application process. So this year, our registration process will open on September 16th, which is next Monday. So at that point, interested residents will identify a desired bike type. So that general e-bike, the e-cargo or adaptive e-bike. And then we'll have approximately 2 weeks to complete the registration process. They will just input some general information about themselves and the bike they're interested in. This provides time for technical challenges or questions to be resolved over that 2 weeks. Additionally, our contractor will be providing some different office hours for folks to be able to get that help that they need if applicable. On the registration due date, Aptim, our contractor, will conduct a random selection for each voucher category to identify those who will be awarded the limited number of vouchers. Voucher number by category will actually be determined generally based on the percentage of registrants per category. And then all who registered will receive an email letting them know whether they did receive a voucher this round, whether they are waitlisted, or whether they will not receive a voucher during this round. And finally, those who have been randomly chosen to apply for a voucher will then have 96 hours to submit an application by uploading their proof of residency and income. And once the application is confirmed, the resident will receive their voucher and be able to select from a list of approved bike shops and purchase their bike. All right. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. We would appreciate tab membership's assistance in spreading the word about the program. And I'm happy to point you in the right direction for any materials that you might need to do that. And with that, happy to answer your questions. And I will share that Sydney may chime in as she assisted in managing the program last year. And so she may have a little bit more knowledge in some areas than I do. Thanks.
Thanks, Annie.
Thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but did you describe how this is being advertised or promoted? Like, how will people who qualified know about it?
Yeah, great question. So our communications staff has assisted in getting the word out to different organizations. Community Cycles is actually promoting it on kind of their social media and Facebook pages, and they are also reaching out to certain organizations that serve the populations that we are looking to serve as well with this program. Aptum is also reaching out to organizations to spread the word, and then we're kind of doing different reach outs on a staff level to make sure that folks are getting the word as well. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Okay. Trini?
This is more like a suggestion given all of the, and we want obviously more people on bikes, and the idea is just to have people understanding what the rules are of the road, and perhaps having some sort of education paired up with this would be a good idea. Maybe for creating, I know that we worked on an e-bike safety campaign, so maybe that same working group could aid in providing like a pamphlet or something that could be distributed at the same time while people are getting their bikes, something so we can be proactive about this. Because I think one thing that a lot of people don't think about, well, first of all, is getting the understanding to the parents of what they're actually purchasing for their children, and and number two, that the children have really any concept of what their behavior should be while operating an e-bike, and because of the differentials between a bike and an e-bike. But so it's just a suggestion to perhaps take this opportunity to branch out into education. So
perfect. Yeah, really appreciate those thoughts. And I will share, this specific program is just for folks 18 and older. So this particular program won't be serving kids with the e-bikes, but I will also share that Community Cycles is partnering with us actually to provide classes for anyone that's interested. Kind of once they get the voucher and purchase a bike, they do provide classes that folks can sign up for. And certainly next year we can consider maybe even adding in like a video training or some type of flyer that kind of comes with the voucher receipt. That would be great. Thanks for the thoughts.
That's amazing.
And Trini, I'll just also add from the just work that the Transportation and Mobility Department's doing. You might remember our really quick education and safety courtesy campaign that we did around shared micromobility, specifically e-scooters last year. That was really kind of getting some work started that we expect to expand over the next couple of years, just to all micromobility. So there's more to come also from our shop on that safety and courtesy, information reaching all ages.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Are there, I assume there are some restrictions on the which e-bikes are eligible in terms of their speed regulators, and I know there are issues with some like the Super 73 where those regulators can be apparently overridden. So can you talk about that?
I can only speak to the classes of bikes that are eligible for the program, which are just class 1 and 2. There may be someone else that can speak to the regulator part of the question. So
Right. I don't know that we have much more to add on that topic, Mike. It's something that we're anecdotally aware of, that happens from time to time. But that is precisely why the certain types of classes were chosen for this program.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Tab? Great, thank you. Let's move on.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
All right, so the next one is a quick request from Chris Hagelin, who's representing the AMPS project team tonight. Chris.
He's in his bunker.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty dark down here.
Telling ghost stories.
Yeah. Chris Hagelin, Principal Planner with Transportation Mobility. Yes, no presentation, so this should be quick. If you remember, on August 2nd, Natalie sent out an email to TAB describing that the AMPS policy project update is back online. This was a project that actually started back in 2014, if you can believe it. Went through several rounds of data collection, and then was kind of put on pause because of the pandemic, but it is back and we're happy to have it back. This is a three-legged stool project. The first stool is really updating the parking code, and also reacting to House Bill 24-1304, which gets rid of minimum parking standards for multifamily housing within transit service areas. The second leg of the stool is a TDM ordinance for new development. So making our current practices around requiring TDMs for new developments more robust, plans that have specific targets, plans that can be monitored and enforced for compliance. And the third leg is residential access management around new developments. We all know that many times new developments impact surrounding areas. So we're also looking at, do we have any proactive planning tools to look at mitigating impacts in neighborhoods around those new developments? We went to council on August 8th because this project has been in a hiatus so long. We wanted to go back to council, make sure that this is still their priority, get their input on the project scope, timeline, methodology, and all of those things. We received some good feedback from council. We then went to planning board later in the month to do the same presentation, and we will be at TAB at the October meeting. So you'll receive a very similar presentation, but with the bonus of some council and planning board feedback added, along with some initial findings from our best practices report for the TDM section of the project. What essentially we're looking for is a representative from TAB to serve on the project's technical working group. This working group is likely to meet at least 4 or 5 times between now and the end of the project. Because of the House bill, we need to have the parking code changes in place by June of next year. And so this project, has a fairly quick timeline, but we do plan on probably meeting it, 4 or 5 times to go over what how we're progressing in each of the 3 project areas. So just looking for TAB to appoint somebody who will serve on our committee. Thank you. That's it.
Darcy was all over that, and I was hoping Darcy would be thinking that was within her bandwidth.
Yes, I would like to do that.
I would like for you to do that.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Great. We'll put Darcy on. We will also have a representative from planning board as well, and then a whole mix of people to round out the working group so that we hear from all segments of our group. And we just had a great meeting with our engagement team to think of some strategies in order to get our underrepresented populations also involved in this project. So we're very excited. But thank you, Darcy, for volunteering.
Thank you.
All right, real quick, done.
Excellent. Go back to the ghost stories.
All right.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
I know if he could just recede into his background, that would have been great.
Just like
just fade to black.
So Our next item is also a quick one, just an update on our East Baseline Road Mobility Enhancements Project. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen and Daniel.
Stephen, did you want to do a brief, if you're there, brief intro, or if not, I can just dive in.
Yeah, no, take it away.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Valerie. Good evening, TAB members. My name is Daniel Sheeter, Principal Transportation Planner in the Planning Division, and I'm here tonight with another mobility enhancements update, specifically detailing changes that were implemented on East Baseline over the past month. East Baseline was a major corridor for scheduled repaving in summer 2024 by the Pavement Management Program, or PMP. Policy guidance and community input heard through development of a Safe Routes to School grant application recommended that improvements be coordinated with repaving through the department's Mobility Enhancements Initiative. Coordinating enhancements with the PMP is a cost-effective and efficient way to improve safety for everyone walking, biking, rolling, driving, and taking transit. The changes were informed by a data-driven approach that includes analysis of speeds, crash history, operational impacts, and industry best practices. And due to the need to coordinate with repaving and limited resources, these designs are typically implemented with low-cost materials, avoid major operational changes, and involve minimal, if any, concrete work. East Baseline is the second major mobility enhancements project of 2024, with the first being Moorhead Avenue, completed earlier this summer. The repaving extends for Foothills Parkway east to South Boulder Creek, shown in the blue oval. This map also shows phase 1 of the Core Arterial Network Baseline Road Transportation Safety Improvement Project.
Daniel, we're not seeing a slideshow or anything.
Oh, you're not?
That's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
It was gripping
Now
delivery
that
until I was like, what blue area?
That becomes obvious when I refer to the slide there. Here we go. So I did have one preceding slide there, just showing an existing aerial of Baseline Road, looking east from Manhattan Drive, and kind of detailing some of the policy guidance that informed the design, both from our transportation master plan, low stress walk and bike network plan, Vision Zero action plan, as well as that community engagement I mentioned that was part of a grant development process for a Safe Routes to School project tied to Manhattan Middle School. And then here's that map that you can now see the blue oval on. And so this is showing to the left side of the map the extents of the Baseline Road CAN project. Phase 1 of that project was implemented last summer, also coordinated with repaving work. And those improvements continued west to 28th Street and incorporated tall curb protected bike lanes, as well as other quick build intersection improvements along that segment. The direct connection to the phase 1 project is another reason why enhancements east of Foothills were coordinated with repaving this summer. So the mobility enhancements are focused between Brooklawn Drive and 55th Street and consist of specific operational improvements for people driving and biking that are created through the reorganization of space within the roadway. One travel lane in each direction was repurposed to create space for dedicated right turn lanes at all side streets and post-separated bike lanes. The roadway reconfiguration and post-separated bike lanes are anticipated to reduce vehicle speeds by up to 7 miles per hour on a street segment where existing prevailing speeds exceed the posted speed limit by 7 to 8 miles per hour. Reducing the number of lanes people walking and biking have to cross at Manhattan Drive and 55th can also reduce the potential for a common crash type identified in the Vision Zero action plan. The extension of separated bike lanes east to 55th provide the adjacent neighborhoods with a low stress bike connection to the CAN Baseline phase 1 and planned phase 2 improvements. And then a couple design details to note. The existing vehicle lane configuration at the intersections with Foothills Parkway and at 55th Street were not changed, and the enhancements are not expected to change vehicle travel time. While implementing physical vertical bike lane protection was not feasible with this road repaving effort, timeline, and available funding, future efforts could extend the physical protection east of Foothills Parkway that you saw with Baseline phase 1. And the operational improvements implemented as part of these mobility enhancements create the space required for vertical elements to be implemented in the future. The speed limit setting and signing project, which came to tab earlier this year, already implemented a speed limit reduction between 55th and the city limits, so kind of the center of the map there. As a result, there's a consistent 35-mile-per-hour speed limit from the city limits west all the way to Mohawk Drive on the other side of Foothills. Staff also coordinated with Boulder County to stripe a double solid yellow center line on the 2-lane segment out to Boulder, South Boulder Creek. And then finally, a separate project led by our operations division and capital projects divisions will implement signal upgrades to allow for protected northbound and southbound left turn phasing at Baseline and Manhattan Crescent in winter, spring 2025. And we're not done yet. From there, construction of the grant-funded Safe Routes to School project south of Baseline Road to Manhattan Middle School is planned later in 2025. And so here are some photos showing the new post-separated bike lanes, which were being well used by CU students as I snap these. There are only a few striping details left to be completed at the Manhattan and 55th intersections this week. Then the project will be fully complete. This final set has additional examples of the post-separated bike lanes, including the Manhattan Drive intersection and looking west at the segment where a lane was repurposed between Manhattan and 55th. The intersection details were informed by the recent update to the Design and Construction Standards, or DCS, and staff are monitoring how the changes are operating and look forward to collecting after data over the next year. And that concludes this mobility enhancements update.
Excellent. I was hoping for pictures. Tab, any response other than
Just
excellent?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Thank you for the support. Yeah.
Okay, is that it for matters from staff?
That's all we have. Thanks, Tila.
Okay, no problem. Matters from the board. You probably saw we were sent response letter from City Council for our end of year pre-retreat sort of letter, and this is sort of notable. Meredith sent it around on August 30th. First time I've received a response from council, and I had known the planning board got one, and I was like, well, where's tabs? But here it is. It's a pretty nice overview of what council decided to prioritize. But yeah, so I see Councilmember Spears probably still on here with us. Yes, hello. But thanks for the letter back. It's always nice because it feels like we are shouting into the void sometimes. And even though the stuff that we didn't highlight necessarily made the list, you can kind of see council's reasoning about what they're spending money on, what they're planning to. Definitely support the item about figuring out a better financial strategy for the city. And my understanding is that through some of the work that happened a couple of years ago on specifically transportation funding, that maybe we're going to be looking into better funding mechanisms for transportation in the future. And that seems to tie in with some of the priorities identified by council. And certainly it all comes down to money for us. So just really appreciate that feedback and understanding a little bit more about council's direction. Didn't know if anyone else had any comments or reactions to that letter. But thank you, council, for getting back to us. Does anyone else have anything for open board comment? Any burning issues? And you want to follow up on anything? Mike?
Yeah, I guess so. Our last meeting, we discussed writing a letter to council
You
about
and I, yes.
funding, and I wasn't clear whether I mean, obviously you and I should talk about that. And I don't know if it would be feasible to have other tab members sign that, or if there are open records issues with that.
Yeah, so typically, I think we talked about this last time, typically 2 people work on such a thing, and then we send out a draft for people to look at, and then we will
just like discuss it kind of at this time of the meeting, next time when we're all there. That's how we satisfy the Cora issues, so.
What's the subject of the letter?
It's the issue of concern about decreasing matching funds for TIP grants and CIP projects.
Yeah, kind of a raw pitch to give transportation and mobility more money before they approve
Somewhere.
the budget. Because these things are important. They're hoping to see Iris happen, right? But if the money doesn't materialize, then there's not a whole lot we can do. So that was kind of the thinking that spurred it. So hopefully by this time next month, Mike and I will have gotten our act together and have something for you to look at. Anything else? Okay. We will have our agenda setting meeting next week. Valerie, welcome to your first tab as the interim director. But if tab members have anything that they want to include on the agenda or make sure that we cover, even if it's not, for next month, but something that you want to have on our radar, as the winter progresses, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever you'd like. But we will be in touch. Anything else, people? Excellent. I will entertain a motion to adjourn then. Thank you to everyone here who's still on the call, was here to support tonight. Oh, Trina, did you raise your hand because you moved to adjourn?
Yes.
I second.
Thank you. I thought you were just waving goodbye, like off we go. Okay, well, until next month, lovely to see you, and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.